Call to order. Thanks, Joey. What is today? May 27th meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Community College District Board of Trustees. Vice Chair Chuck can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and invite everyone to stand if you are able to do so.
Should we do a roll call real quick?
Oh, you want to know who's here? Okay. Yeah, let's do roll call.
We all know who's here, but you know,
Let's do
formalities. Okay. Chair Anderson?
Yes, I'm here.
Vice Chair Steck? I saw him.
I'm here. I was just muted.
He's muted, or he's.
I shouldn't be muted now. Am I? Can you hear me?
You're
You're
on.
very, very quiet.
Oh, well, I'll try to be loud.
Okay. Trustee Green?
I'm here.
Trustee Dungustafson?
Yes, I'm here also.
Trustee Johnson?
Here.
Student Trustee Mountain?
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So now, Vice Chair Steck, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Please stand and follow me. I pledge allegiance
To the
To
flag
the flag
of the
of the
United States of America and to the republic for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
for
liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. The most awkward part of the Zoom meeting. Okay, so there was no closed session today, so there's no need to report out on actions taken in closed session. Next, we move on to item 1D, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Johnson,
Second.
I'll second.
seconded by Trustee Stack. I would just point out that it does have on here a note that we will taking 10-minute breaks at 5:30 and 7. So as we approve the agenda, we're approving those break times. So is there any member of the public who would like to make a comment on the actual agenda before we start? And remember, you can use the raise hand function if you're joining on Zoom or *9 to. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Chair Anderson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Stack?
Right.
Trustee Green?
Aye.
Trustee Dungustafson?
Aye.
Trustee Johnson?
Aye.
Advisory vote, Student Trustee Mountain?
All right.
Thank you. Unanimous.
Great. All right, so next we would go on to acknowledgement of guests. Mr. Martin, do we have any guests this afternoon?
Thank you very much, Chair Anderson, and I do not believe we have any guests at this time, but if they do enter the meeting, we will make sure they are acknowledged properly.
All right, so then we will move to item 2B, a moment of silence in honor of Miss Edith Johnson. So before we take that moment, Trustee Green asked for us to have this on our agenda, and I don't know if you wanted to say anything, tell us about Edith. Rosalind.
Thank you, Board Chair. Edith Johnson was my English professor during the years that I attended MPC, and she went on after retirement to another elected official capacity as mayor in Marina, and I was also one of the many students that helped her during that campaign. She also served us in District 4 as county supervisor for a brief time. We also interacted with each other as she was on the Veterans Committee at Fort Ord Reuse Authority, known as FORA. And she was a brilliant, lovely woman, and I really admired and adored her. And I am very happy that we are able to honor her during this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment about Edith before we observe the moment of silence? All right, please join me. All right, thank you for bringing that forward, Rosalind. I think it's really important thing for us to do, recognize someone who gave so much both to our district and our community at large. Okay, so next we're going to move on to item number 3A, which is public comment. So any member of the public who wishes to address the governing board on an item that is not on today's agenda, but within the purview of the district, is invited to do so. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comment. You'll note before we get started, there were 3 public comments that were included with the agenda packet that the board has had an opportunity to review in advance. A letter related to GenTrain, as well as a letter from the ASMPC in support of Superintendent President Martin, and a letter from Samar Haig, RN, also in support of Superintendent President Martin. So noting those are in the record. If there's any other member of the public that would like to make a comment, please raise your hand or press *9 to let us know. Okay, I see MBPWR. Let's see, can I unmute you? No, I cannot. All right, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very good. My name is Mary Pendlay, and I am a representative for GenTrain to your board meetings. So I'm just going to listen and take notes if I may.
Of course. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a comment on an item that is not on today's agenda? All right, seeing, let's see, no hands. We'll go ahead and, oh, I see Marlene. Marlene's laptop. Marlene would like to make a comment. If you could unmute Marlene, please. All right, Marlene, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I just think it's impressive how well the college has dealt with this enormous change, teaching online all of a sudden for people. I think it was, they just did a really remarkable job.
All right, thank you for that comment. Okay, is there any other member of the public that would like to make a comment? You seeing any hands, Jeremy? There's somebody who's unmuted that we're getting a little bit of sound on, but I don't think is one of the board members. So if you're not a board member, if you could just check and make sure your sound is muted, that would be helpful. All right, well, seeing no more hands, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move into section 4 of the agenda, organization committee reports and presentation. First report is from the ASMPC, and we had a written report in the packet, but I didn't know if there was anyone here from ASMPC to speak to that, or if Robert, if you wanted to make some comments. No, I see Robert's mouth moving, but I can't hear him. Can't hear you either, Jereen.
Can you
All
hear
right.
Robert? Robert, are you there?
Robert? It looks like he's unmuted now.
There I am. Am I here?
There you are.
Okay. No, after all of that, I think the report speaks for itself. I don't have any further comments.
Okay. Is there any member of the board that had a question or comment on the report? Lauren?
I actually do. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
The bottom of the report, if I can get you to scroll down, I guess I can look at my own copy. It advocates the last sentence of the next to the last paragraph. Certain fees like the health center fee and the student fee, use fee should be waived during the fall semester if we continue to have online only education and if we continue to implement social distancing requirements. I was wondering if perhaps David could answer the question about, is the health center open? Is there a reason for continuing to collect the health center fee if the campus is closed? And also the student center fee. That's a use fee, and if they can't use the student center, is it appropriate for us to not charge it, or is there some use that's put to that funds that doesn't go away?
I had the same question. Thank you.
Sure, and if I may, thank you very much for the question, Dr. Steck and Chair Anderson. With regards to the student health fee, our student health center is open and operational at this time. We are receiving numerous requests for counseling services from our students due to the current situation. So I would continue to support the potential of utilizing a health fee in the fall semester, because our student health center, even though we may not have a high volume of foot traffic, they are still constantly receiving emails for a variety of requests, most significantly being mental health services for our student population. So our student health services team is doing a wonderful job in providing those services electronically, as well as ensuring that our students have the resources they need in our community to maximize the support that's out there for them. In regards to the student center fee, that is an optional fee that we can decide in the fall semester to not charge to the students. But ultimately, that fee also provides resources for a variety of the support that our students are receiving now. Most primarily, it would be the food pantry, to where those funds are providing the opportunity for our students to have access to food. Although it's on a drive-by appointment basis, we do have an operational food pantry, which is being utilized by a large portion of our student body. So that fee is optional, but I would encourage us to look at providing both those fees as optional and assessing them in the fall semester.
Thank you.
And perhaps some communication around how the continued collection of those fees continues to benefit students might be something to think about.
Absolutely.
Folks are thinking, I'm not on campus, so I can't use those services.
And reminding them that the services are available. They're paying for them.
Great. So if there's no other questions, or I guess I should see if there's any member of the public that had a question or comment on the ASMPC report.
Chair Anderson, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to take a moment, because I don't know if Ms. Benny will be joining us in our June meeting, to recognize and acknowledge her contribution to MPC this year as the ASMPC student president. She has done an amazing job in engaging our entire campus community, and the level of participation of herself as well as her colleagues in our governance meetings, as well as our campus events, has really been phenomenal this year. She is a leader in all aspects of the term, and her legacy of student participation and engagement on this campus will live on as she joins Cal Berkeley and becomes a bear. But I do remind her that even though she may be a bear for the next 2 years, she will always be a Lobo. So I wanted to just take a minute and recognize Miss Benny for her absolutely amazing contributions to MPC this year.
Thank you for that. All right, so seeing no one clamoring to speak, we'll consider that report accepted, received. And next we had the Academic Senate report that Ms. Gerard put forward. Is there anyone from Academic Senate who wanted to make additional comments on the report before any questions or comments from the board? All right, seeing none, are there any board members who had a question or comment on this report? All right, Marilyn, you should be able to talk. Go ahead.
Okay, do you want us to use the hand feature, or can I just raise my hand when I have a comment? Which would you prefer?
Either is fine. I can see you on my screen, so if you raise your hand, I see you.
Okay.
The little blue hand is a little more obvious.
The little blue hand is obvious. Okay, I sometimes have trouble keeping track of those. Anyway, I just wanted to recognize and thank Adria for this report. I found it very informative, and certainly the cooperation that seems to be prevalent on campus between all the groups is recognized and appreciated from this end.
Thank you for that, Marilyn. All right, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll consider that report received. Next on the agenda, 4C, MPCEA report. Is there anyone here from the MPCEA to provide a report to the board? Raise your hand or *9. All right, seeing none, we will move on. MPC TA report. Is there anyone here from MPC TA to provide a report to the board? All right, seeing no one, we'll move on. Item 4E, Superintendent President Search Ad Hoc Committee report. And I believe, Marilyn, we decided I was doing that? Yes, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So since our last committee meeting, or I'm sorry, our last board meeting, the ad hoc committee moved forward with the criteria that was outlined by this board for identifying members of the campus and broader community to serve on the Superintendent President Search Committee. And I think on behalf of both Marilyn and myself, we really want to thank the campus community in particular for helping us to identify a really robust group of persons who are interested in helping to provide the board support as we search to or seek to fill our permanent superintendent president position. It was just a great group of people to have to try to weed through and figure out who to serve on that committee, and then also all of the recommendations that came from our board members as well for community members. We have not at this point released the names of the individuals serving on the search committee. Had conversation as a committee about whether or not we would do that, and decided that we would, once we got that first search committee meeting together, we would put that question to the group about releasing individual names. There was some advice from our human resource department that putting campus names out there could create undue lobbying or whatnot for those individuals. So we wanted to give them the option of whether or not we put all the names out there. But we do intend to provide the board at least a report of the different diversity categories and whatnot that these people represent. So including gender, ethnicity, race, area of campus, what they're teaching, if they're faculty or whatnot. So you can get a sense that we really did take the criteria that you put to us and put together a robust committee. I think just yesterday we were able to confirm our final community member that they were available and interested in serving with us. So the next step would be through Joreen and Kayla to reach out to everyone on the committee to try to schedule that first steering committee meeting. We're still pushing on an aggressive timeline to try to have a recommendation to this board by November, with an intention of having this be primarily a virtual search activity. We also, there's an item later on this agenda related in the consent related to the search process of re-engaging CCSS as our consultant to support the search committee in our work. Had an opportunity to speak with them. It is not a free continuing, but we're able to streamline the process and we'll be paying for direct expenses. And also one other thing I wanted to point out was that HR has been able to identify some resources that would be able to provide a nominal stipend to our 2 student participants. Since all of the folks from the campus personnel are going to be compensated for their time, and it's generally a best practice from the field that they had recently learned about in a conference. So I guess where we're at is we're working to schedule the full meeting of the steering committee, or I'm sorry, the search committee, and hoping that the board will take action to approve the contract with CCSS so that we have the professional support needed to do this search. So if anybody has any questions or comments for Marilyn and I? All right, I'm not seeing any from the board. Any member of the public that wanted to make a comment or ask a question about this report? All right, seeing none, I will say that the report is received and we can move forward. Okay, so next we are on to consent calendar items 5A through Q. Is there any member of the board that would like to pull a consent item for comment or question? Dr. Stack?
I'd like to pull item E,
Okay,
monthly financial statement.
all right. Anybody else? I had one. Oh, Marilyn?
Can I
you have
ask what item was being pulled?
item E, like Edward. All right, and I wanted to pull, or at least just make a comment on item B, which is the minutes from the last meeting. And that was it. Is there any member of the public that wanted to pull an item from the consent calendar for comment or question? All right, seeing none. How about we
Give me
have
one
a
more
little,
shot at this.
okay,
I'm sorry. The item that for the CCSS contract, I guess I have a question about it. I don't
Okay.
know that it goes to that level, but may as well ask about it. Why not?
great. So if the board is comfortable, we'll go ahead and ask the questions and whatnot and see if we might still be able to take all the consent in one vote. So we'll just go in alphabetical order. Item B, it's a really tiny thing. The resolution link for the classified employee goes to the election resolution as opposed to a resolution around classified employee leave. So if we can just get that updated, so somebody was getting in there, they have the right link. And then Dr. Steck, item E.
So item E is our normal summary of all funds, as well as the report that goes along with it. I just believe that, and I think we all agree that one of the most important responsibilities we have as trustees is to focus on the budget. And I fear that moving the financial statement and moving that particular table, as well as the rhetoric around the table, to the consent agenda, kind of allows us, or makes it easy for us to ignore that very, very important portion of our charge. As you said, it's one of the budget is one of the most important things we do, along with the employment of the superintendent and president. That's just in general. Now, this month we have lots of stuff on the agenda that is going to be focusing our attention on the budget, but that's not usually the case. Usually we don't have much at all except for this item. So I like the idea of keeping it open and keeping it on not the consent agenda, but back on the action item agenda. And with that, I have questions about what we're going to do with the budget now. Some of them will be answered in the future, but in case we don't get to it, this is, I think, an opportunity for us to explore, or for us to be educated on what the district's planning on doing. Say, for example, with the deferrals that are coming in June. Do we have enough money? Do we think we have enough money in our savings, essentially, to cover the June deferral? I hear that the May deferral is now more or less defunct, but the June deferral is still, I think, 100%. So that's, I guess if I needed to have a specific question about the funds, I'd ask that. I'd also ask about two other funds, and one was the Associated Students Fund and the other was the Student Center Fund. Both of them are at the order of, I believe, the 60% level in terms of revenue coming in. At least one of those has to be because I presume of COVID, but I'm not sure. And we don't have much in the way of expenses. And I guess I wanted to sort of fit that question into the request that ASMPC provided, which David already answered. But maybe we could at least talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So Mr. Hagler, are you able to address the question related to, I guess, revenue for the Student Center Fund and the Associated Student Body Funds? Why we're...
Certainly. Thank you for that question. Yes, I would assume that that our spring term and COVID-19 has impacted the resources for both ASB and Student Center, though I wouldn't expect it to be significant. For the most part, students enrolled, and so I guess I really don't have an answer as to the exact reason why those percentages appear relatively low. Back to your first question, I am monitoring cash. In fact, we're planning to meet with a finance gentleman and start discussing trends. Those are the two things that I need to do, understanding that deferrals are coming. And a little bit of that is in my presentation coming up. So we are monitoring the cash balance, and cash this month is up slightly from last month. And the last word I had was that it was going to be a part of May as well as June. So I'm still waiting for more clear information. In general, our June apportionment is relatively small. And so we'll be monitoring the situation, and it can make that part of my VPAS report each month on the go forward is kind of a status of cash if the board would like that.
It would be a good thing. Now, you said May and June. There's May and June of 2020, as well as potentially April, May, and June of 2021. Are you talking about 2020?
Yeah. I'm immediately talking about the 1920 impact, so that's this month and next month. And the projections by the governor was 332 million for 1920 statewide, and then 660 million or so in the next fiscal year. And I've got those numbers on the slide in one of my presentations.
Okay, now I guess I'll defer my other questions to the presentation because I got more questions. Well, just let me do one more since we're on this topic before I go. I apologize. We have never, at least in my time on the board, had to make use of a TRAN before. Not that it's a bad thing, but we were always able to figure out a way to pay for the deferrals, essentially with the savings that we had. Do you think that, I didn't realize that it was going to be possible to do a TRAN for May, let alone May.
Well, I can answer that. So I'm planning to engage the discussion, but just in general, to contrast where I came from and where I am now. In Compton, the majority of the resources they received was from the state, and their property tax base was relatively low. Here at MPC, it's just the opposite. We have very significant property tax revenues that come in April. So in the last part of our fiscal year, we do get a pop upwards of cash just from property taxes alone. And the resources coming from the state are relatively low. So I don't think it's near as impactful, which may be one of the reasons why you haven't needed a TRAN.
Thank you.
If I may jump into the discussion, Chair Anderson and Dr. Steck, and reference the summary of all funds document that was provided as part of the board package. The far right column of that document indicates the cash balance in our funds. So ultimately, in any discussion regarding deferrals or TRANs, you look at the monthly payroll expenses first at any institution. At MPC, as indicated in item G on the consent agenda, our monthly payroll is about $2.6 million on average. So in looking at the discussion of how deferrals will impact MPC, you typically take the monthly payroll and extrapolate it out to burn up the remaining cash balance. So with 13 million of cash left, we could essentially get through 3 to 3.5 months of payroll without any cash coming in. So ultimately, in regards to the summertime deferrals, we are watching them, but ultimately don't expect to have to take any action because of that 13 million cash balance.
Thank you, and I apologize for taking so much time on this item.
No apology needed whatsoever. I did send you an email, Lauren, and it was just to you. So just for the rest of the board, because I do know you made this comment last meeting, had staff go ahead and look at what were best practices related to agenda construction as it relates to the monthly financials, and found that it is very common for those financials to be on the consent agenda as it is a routine item. And as board members, we have the ability to do what you did this afternoon and pull it if you have a comment or question. So we're going to keep doing that for a while, and just, you know, invite anyone who has a comment or question to pull it when they have need to. So next we have item I, which Dr. Stuckey wanted to also ask a question or make a comment about.
Yeah, the contract is for some dollar amount. I think I don't see it in front of me, but it's $19,000, and that's supposed to be for direct expenses only.
Mm-hmm.
But we're given a dollar amount for direct expenses, which is kind of an odd thing. I would think that, I'm wondering, is the contract supposed to be for direct expenses up to $19,000, or are they just planning on spending $19,000 and sending us, or whatever, you know, just are giving them the direct $19,000? That's the question.
That's a great question. I don't have it. Jolene, you were working with CCSS. Do you have any willing to respond to that? I don't have a response for that.
It includes the 19,000 for direct expenses plus travel, if any, and there was a list in the proposal of the contract that breaks everything out. I think it's number 3, Sean. So then right there, it says expenses not included in the fee. And I didn't hear the rest of your question, Lauren. I just heard.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's the problem. I'm talking loud in my office. Sorry.
Yeah. Are you close to your device?
Yeah, right in front of it. Here I am.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, I can't hear a word you say.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm saying such pearls of wisdom. I'm so sorry.
I know. It's very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to talk loud. I can try also to get it. Well, I don't, you know, I'll see what I can do. I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm talking the way I normally talk, and I haven't had a problem before. All right, so the 19,000 is direct expenses, and that includes position printing if we're going to have a printed thing, candidate travel, which could be expensive.
No, those are not included.
Not included. Okay, not included. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure what the 19,000 is in that case, but okay.
Yeah, so the 19,000 is for all the items that are going to be step 1 through 10, but it is interesting because it does say direct expenses, in which case you expect to see a $135 per hour kind of thing, but instead they've said we're going to do this for 19.
I would expect to see up to 19,000 or something.
Yeah.
But that's
so I mean, we have an option of tabling it and coming back. We do have a special board meeting on June 1st that we could potentially bring this item back if we wanted to get clarity before the board approved it.
Sure.
Does that feel good to folks? Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up from Rosalind, and I'm comfortable with that. So I guess we will table this item to the June 1st meeting, and if we could ask staff to follow up and get some clarity on that, or some updated language that either reflects an up to or just an hourly rate.
Thanks.
No problem. All right, so with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items A through H and J through Q, with I having been removed from the calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion by trustee Green, seconded by trustee Johnson. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on the motion? Seeing none, all right, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
You're muted.
Chair Anderson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Steck,
Yes.
Trustee Green. You need to unmute Trustee Green.
Aye.
Thank you. Trustee Dunn-Gustafson,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Student Trustee Mountain.
Yes.
Did you say yes?
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Great, thank you. I feel like we're all getting Zoom fatigue. It's like we know how to do it, but we've been doing it so much. It's just like, oh, let me unmute, blah, blah, blah. So hang in there, guys. We're rocking and rolling. We're already on new business. So item 6A, information item, MPC fall plans and proposed reopening plan. I believe that is you, Mr. Martin.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And may I grab the screen if that is permissible? Thank you. And let me. All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much, trustees and Chair Anderson, for the opportunity this evening to discuss some of the work that our campus has been up to over the last several weeks. As we all know, we are currently in a shelter-in-place mandate by the Monterey County Department of Health. So as we transition to the shelter-in-place mandates close this May 31st, we're starting to have the discussions on what reopening MPC will look like and some of the operational things that we need to get in place in order to make sure that we can reopen MPC in the most efficient yet safe way as possible. So the campus has been hard at work over the last several weeks in developing a campus-wide reopening plan. We are presenting it to the board this evening to communicate the work that has been done, but also seek feedback and input and additional directions and guidance from our governing board of trustees. So as we go through the plan, if you have any questions or if you'd like to provide any feedback or input, please don't hesitate to interrupt the presentation, or we can address all the questions at the end. Real quickly, we'll start on stage 0. As we go through this plan, we are implementing a 4-stage plan. Right now, we are in stage 0, and each stage has a title and a brief description of what that stage entails. So I'm looking at the front page of the report. We are currently in stage 0, which is a shelter-in-place mandate. Currently, MPC is closed to employees, students, and the public as well. So this is our current existence. So this is our baseline stage. So as we discuss future stages, if there were to be a resurgence of the COVID-19 virus, or if for whatever reason the county health officer was to reestablish a shelter-in-place mandate in the fall semester, regardless of what stage we were in the reopening plan, we would revert back to stage 0 as part of this plan's implementation. So real quickly, as we go through the plan, you're going to notice items that are highlighted in bold. These items are items that will require a specific and unique and distinct plan by themselves. We ultimately wanted to use this opportunity to provide a set of framework and really have an overarching plan, but not create a 80 to 90 page document that will get us into the weeds. So ultimately, as we were looking at developing our reopening plan, we identified specific areas of this plan that would need its own unique specific plan. So those items are highlighted in bold as we go through this plan. So real quickly, one of the first decisions that we need to make or decide upon as we move forward through the fall semester is what will our instruction look like? At this point in time, there is still a large sense of unknown in regards to the potential for face-to-face instruction, as well as our ability to successfully meet any safety measures that may be required. For example, if classrooms are required to have 6-foot space distancing as well as health shields installed as part of the classroom instruction, the potential of an institution in getting all of those safety measures in place over the summer, as every college is trying to do it at once, it's going to create a supply and demand situation to where we might not be able to meet the needs of the safety requirements. Ultimately, the California Chancellor's Office and Chancellor Oakley came out last week and recommended that all 114 or 15 colleges transition to online instruction for the fall semester. He is still leaving the decision up to local community colleges in regards to potential offerings of face-to-face instruction. But ultimately, based on that information and based on the unknown and based on MPC not wanting to offer face-to-face instruction and then having to quickly pivot once again in the middle of a semester, in order to avoid all three of those situations, the decision was made to offer an online fall semester. We will still permit face-to-face classes if absolutely necessary in order to continue the class or the program or for our students to meet the learning outcomes. So that is a high-level overview of our fall plan to date. Ultimately, as more information becomes available over the summer, and as we get to the fall start time, as well as any late start fall classes, we're going to be continuously reevaluating and working with our campus leaders to make sure that if we are able to offer a face-to-face modality in a safe and efficient way, we will continue to look and explore those options as much as we can. So in thinking about our reopening plan, and just as a reminder, we are still in stage 0. Our current shelter-in-place mandate expires May 31st. But ultimately, when we come out of the shelter-in-place, our next step as an institution will be to implement stage 1. Stage 1, up at the top, is an initial return, but with significant campus limitations. So in stage 1, MPC would be open to the employees, but not students and or the public at this point. So this is really our opportunity to bring our employees back to campus and start looking at how we can settle in collectively and start implementing some safety measures to get ready for the students to come back. So at stage 1, we are asking that our employees return to campus, but ultimately if we have high-risk populations or if accommodations are needed due to childcare or other circumstances, we're still being very flexible with our employees. We want to make sure that during this time, if you are able and willing to come to work here at MPC, that would be great, but ultimately we're working diligently with our employee groups to make sure that there's alternatives available if needed. We're also looking at limiting access to buildings for housed personnel only to make sure we don't have individuals walking in and out of buildings for things that may be unnecessary. We're looking at staggering shifts and changing working locations, so looking and exploring 4-10 options, as well as potentially separating employees who may have close working quarters. Additionally, some specific plans that will be worked on in stage 1 will be the cross-training of our employee groups. Our classified employees have, in many respects, responsibilities that directly relate to interacting with students. So if we bring our employees back and we're not having that day-to-day interaction with our students at that point, we want to make sure that we're repurposing and providing 40 hours of purposeful work to all of our employees. So there may be a shifting of some responsibilities to make sure we're meeting our needs and utilizing our workforce to the best of our ability. Additionally, we are going to develop and implement work from home plans. So in stage 1, we want to do everything that we can to eliminate unnecessary foot traffic on our campus. So if a work from home plan makes sense and it's feasible and it's agreed upon between the employee and the supervisor, then I think that that's something we would definitely encourage in stage 1. In looking at the students, we would still offer appointment only drive-by services for really only 2 things at this point, and that would be technology needs and food pantry access. In regards to our campus requirements, we will have a mandate of face coverings and physical distancing. MPC will provide face coverings to all of our employees. We'll have max occupancy posted in common areas. And also in shared workspaces, we will require face coverings. And in stage 1, if our employees feel comfortable and all safety measures are being followed, we'll start permitting in-person meetings to where employees can sit 6 feet apart with face shields or face coverings and engage in work-related business. In regards to our administrative services, in conjunction with academic affairs and student services, we're really looking at developing a comprehensive plan to implement safety measures, and that may be floor markings, health shields, hand sanitizer, looking at how we can implement strict nightly cleaning protocols, as well as rolling out a comprehensive training program for our employees. Our student health services, as well as our campus safety committee, has been and will be working on the infectious disease outbreak plan for MPC. So really making sure that when we start bringing employees back, we're doing so in a way that they have access to multiple trainings to make them feel comfortable and empowered with knowledge in regards to safe and healthy working environments. We'll also be providing cleaning materials to our individual employees and creating an ad hoc committee to look at our existing campus space. Right now, MPC is configured the way that we left it in March when the shelter in place was ordered. Ultimately, our existing space is set up to offer traditional instruction at a community college. But in looking out at the future, that traditional instruction may and most likely will change and be altered with future guidance. So we really want to start the conversations early on how to reconfigure our traditional classroom and campus space to fit the needs of the health and county mandates that will inevitably follow once the shelter in place is lifted. And then real quickly, we'll not be allowing employee travel at this time, and our human resources will be leading a health and welfare program rollout to make sure that all of our employees have access to the benefit programs that we offer through our employee wellness program. In regards to instructional, we'll still be fully an online college. Faculty will be able to access the college if needed to provide online instruction, and we will offer limited face-to-face instruction based on the approval of the Monterey County Health Department. Same with non-instructional. These are our counseling services and other student support services. Faculty may return to campus if needed to provide online support, but ultimately in stage 1, when MPC is open to employees, but not yet students or the public, all of our services will remain remote. So that's a high-level overview of stage 1.
Can we take a pause right there, David, and see if
Sure.
there are any questions from the board on that first bit of information we received? So I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
I wanted to make sure I understood correctly that you said Chancellor Oakley was advising community colleges that we should be primarily or solely distance learning online instruction for the fall. Did I hear you say that?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm trying to understand with the fall instruction, where that fits into your stages, because it says open to employees, but not students or the public, but then it also says that we have limited in-person instruction. So those two things don't make sense to me.
Sure, and thank you very much for that question. And in regards to the fall instruction, that is really our plan on how to deliver the instruction and what our students and our faculty can prepare for. Ultimately, the stage implementation is really providing the step-by-step process to eventually get us back to face-to-face instruction. So what I mean by that, Chair Anderson, is by having an online fall semester, that gives our campus more time to get through the stages before we are at the stage to where we're bringing students back onto campus. If we were to have made the decision to offer face-to-face instruction in the fall, then we would essentially have the summertime to get through stage 1, 2, and 3 of this plan. So ultimately, by going online in the fall, that gives us a little bit more time to get to stage 3, where we'll bring students back. And great question on the limited face-to-face instruction, because right now we are offering face-to-face instruction in 2 programs. That would be the nursing and the police program. And ultimately, those programs have specific approval from the Monterey County Department of Health to offer face-to-face instruction. So ultimately, it wasn't MPC's decision to offer the face-to-face alone. It was really the decision of the Monterey County Health Department, and then MPC decided to take that exemption and offer the face-to-face instruction. If that answered your question, Chair Anderson.
I think so, but so what I hear you saying is in terms of face-to-face, it's very limited and specific. It's not necessarily individual course or individual program decision. It's more of these are authorized under the health order, and these are the ones that we're moving forward with in person or some sort of hybrid, but everything else is going to be online. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. In stage 1, where we are coming out of shelter in place, so most likely this will be our summertime stage, we would only offer face-to-face instruction if we had specific approval to do so by the county health department. So the offering of the face-to-face instruction would not necessarily be a decision driven by MPC.
Okay, great. And I see that Student Trustee Mountain has a question. Robert?
David, how would you compare MPC's approach to opening to other community colleges? Would you say it's more conservative, less conservative, or about the same?
That's a great question, Student Trustee Mountain. And to be honest with you, I do not have a very good sense of where other districts are at in their planning stage. I know that the chancellor of the community college system has convened a task force of different individuals throughout the system to start helping districts put a plan like this together. I do think that in looking briefly at other local colleges, MPC is ahead of the game in the development of such plans, because a lot of districts are waiting for official guidance to develop their plans. We thought it would be prudent, especially with summer upon us, to develop our plans now and then ultimately adjust as needed as subsequent health and health guidance is released. So in regards to specific districts, I cannot speak to any other specific districts, but I think as a whole system, MPC is ahead of the game in the development of a reopening plan.
All right, are there any more questions on the first 3 pages of this, or can we let David continue? But I know I'm the one who stopped us, but. All right, David, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. And just real quickly as a recap, we have stage 0, which is MPC is closed to employees, students, and the public. This is MPC as of today. And then our first stage would be stage 1, which is MPC opens to our employees, but we're not yet open to students and or the public. And that takes us to stage 2. And stage 2 is where MPC is open to employees, but a limited number of students. So at this point in time in stage 2, we are having all of our employees come back to campus, and we are inviting students onto campus, but in a limited fashion, which we'll cover in just a moment. So in stage 2, we will ask all of our employees to come to campus for their workday. Once again, in stage 2, we're still being very flexible with high-risk populations, our employees who need specific accommodations. In stage 2, we're developing a comprehensive student training. So as students start coming back onto our campus, we want to make sure that we have a comprehensive training module for them to take as well. Student services at this time in stage 2 will be littering our campus with health messages, flyers, posters on poster boards, really leveraging our campus bulletin board space to get the word out in regards to best practices, safety measures, and informational tips in regards to the current COVID-19 situation. Students, in looking at item number 4, students will be able to access MPC campus in stage 2, but ultimately it'll be on an appointment-only basis, and it'll be for a specific task in which they need assistance or guidance with. So ultimately in stage 2, we are not permitting student congregation or allowing students to come onto campus and hang out for a long period of time. We want to make sure that students can access our campus, but ultimately once the service is provided and received, we would ask the student to leave to ensure that there is no congregation, and we limit gatherings to the best of our ability. So some of the things that our students would be able to access in stage number 2 would be our food pantry, student services, welcome center, our financial aid, our admissions and records, and our library learning resources. Once again, in stage number 2, face coverings will be required if an employee is in a common area. MPC will provide the face coverings and will also continue to enforce maximum occupancy in common areas. All campus governance groups and search committees are still meeting remotely in stage number 2, but ultimately if a committee or if a governance group feels comfortable in meeting face-to-face, then we would permit that, ensuring that safety measures are indeed followed. Our student health services is really becoming the hub of our COVID-19 information. So as students come to us with questions, we're making sure we're directing them to student health services for a clear and most importantly, consistent message in regards to the COVID-19 situation. Employee travel will be permitted if the employee is comfortable. Any independent contractors may resume services if the safety measures are followed. And in stage number 2, our admissions and records and our financial aid are still very flexible in regards to our standard policies and procedures. We've permitted our students to do a lot of the admissions and records and financial aid work via email. So at this point in time, we're not collecting the signatures and really the verification documents that we would normally do. But ultimately, in eliminating unnecessary foot traffic and giving our students the best opportunity to continue to enroll and get financial aid assistance, we're still very flexible in our admissions and records and financial aid policies. And the excused withdrawal will still be available for the spring 2020 term. And then lastly, our grading options and drop deadlines for our students will revert back to normal. So starting in the summer term and into the fall semester, we will implement our standard practices in regards to the timelines where students can drop a course or select a W grade or potentially file for an EW grade as well. So in stage number 2, our faculty may return to campus, but ultimately most of our instruction is still online. Limited face-to-face library and learning services may be provided, but the safety measures must be followed. So these are our tutoring centers, or our math labs, or our reading centers. And then once again, if we have specific approval from the Monterey County Health Department to offer a course in person, we will do so only because we have the specific exemption of approval from the county. For our non-instructional, faculty may return to the campus in order to provide online support services. And in stage 2, we are starting to phase in limited, on appointment only, with safety measures being followed, counseling services. So in stage number 2, our students will be able to come onto campus and interact with a counselor to get guidance in the face-to-face modality. So that is a summary of stage 2. And once again, this is where MPC is open to all employees. We're open to students, but open to students in a limited and appointment-only basis, to where we're still not permitting mass gatherings or congregation or hanging out on our campus. So I'll stop there with any questions from the trustees.
All right, Trustee Mountain.
So when would you anticipate being in stage 2?
That's a great question, Trustee Mountain, Student Trustee Mountain. I think at this point it's a bit premature to give a deadline on that, because ultimately stage 1 will be implemented upon the removal of the shelter-in-place mandate and permitted through additional health and safety guidances. So depending on when we can enter into stage 1 and how long it will take to get through stage 1 is really the primary indicators of when we'll get to stage 2. At this point, it would not be prudent for me to give a timeline, because it would strictly be a estimate that would not be based on any health guidance available at this time.
Well, how about a wild guess?
A wild guess. Well, if you would ask me to give a wild guess, I would say sometime during the fall semester.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from trustees? I had one, David. So you indicated, or you said in this, as it relates to item number 11, grading options and deadlines, that would begin to be implemented this summer and this fall, but we wouldn't be necessarily in stage 2 yet. So I'm just trying to, again, jive those two comments.
No, and thank you very much for that. The question, Chair Anderson. And I think the comment is very important, because I think that is potentially an item that could be considered as part of the stage 1 discussion, because ultimately what that item is referring to is that for the spring term, so for our existing term, the Chancellor's Office gave our students the flexibility to essentially choose the ability to drop a class at any point in time, even well after the semester ended. So in looking at our summer and our fall terms, we would not have the ability to offer that to our students at this point. So the concept of bringing this item number 11 up to stage number 1, assuming we are in stage number 1 for the summer and the fall terms, I think that's a very important comment, and we can make that adjustment. So thank you very much for identifying that.
Anybody else? Nope. All right, go ahead, David.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. And now we will move to stage 3. So just a brief recap, we have stage 0, shelter in place, MPC is closed. Stage 1 is MPC is open to employees, but not yet to the students or the public. Stage 2 is MPC is open to employees and a limited number of students, and not yet the public, which gets us to stage 3. And this is a full return with limitations. So in stage number 3, MPC is open to employees and all students, but at this point, we're not having public events or public gatherings or non-college events on our campus. In stage number 3, all of our employees would be expected to come to MPC for their workday. All buildings in stage number 3 would be open and operational. We would still recommend face masks, and we would still provide them. But ultimately, that guidance will be clearly defined in future health guidance as to whether or not face masks will be either recommended or mandated at that time. One of the things that we are hoping to have by stage 3 is that our students and our employees have taken our infectious disease training. Once again, in stage number 3, when MPC is open to all of our students, students may come onto campus throughout the day and stay on campus at this point. In front of each classroom and in front of each instructional space, as mentioned in item number 5, we're going to have directions and guidelines for the individuals before they walk into that space. Much like you see in the grocery store now, is before you walk into the grocery store, you'll see a sign that requires a face covering. So our classrooms and our open spaces will have similar signs and directions to make sure we're all understanding what the expectations of that space are. In stage number 3, our food services will be offered, as well as our bookstore will be open. We still will be maintaining strict sanitation requirements, but ultimately when we open our entire campus, we will not be able to deep clean every room, floor to ceiling every night. So ultimately we're going to need to work together to implement a rotational plan on which classrooms and which spaces get deep cleaned and when that occurs throughout the week. Also, all of our governance groups and our search committees are meeting in person. Employee travel is now permitted. Any potential exposure will go to our student health services. Are they still the hub for our communications? At this point in time, our admissions and records and financial aid policies are fully enacted. And once again, mass gatherings or any type of large campus events, such as a theater production, will ultimately have to follow the large gathering guidance that's available at that time. So in regards to our instruction in stage number 3, face-to-face instruction will be permitted, but ultimately any safety measures that will be required must be followed. Faculty may self-select to teach in person, because ultimately if the online modality still makes sense and there's still a demand, we will continue to support and encourage online instruction in stage number 3 and really throughout the remainder of this plan and beyond. Office hours at this point in time for our faculty will be delivered on site if it's face-to-face instruction. We will be requiring mandated seating charts in case we do have a student test positive for the COVID-19. We'll be able to do contact tracing for the classes that they took here in person. So that'll give us the ability to see who the students sat next to in each class that they have here at MPC. If face-to-face instruction, as mentioned, is not preferred, we're still offering full online courses will be available. And once again, our library and learning support services, so our STEM cell and our tutoring centers, will be offered face-to-face, but will follow the guidance. Our non-instructional, so our counseling and our other support services, will have an abbreviated face-to-face, but ultimately we are still following any safety measures that are required. And we will also be providing, in item number 2, these services online, but ultimately as we start phasing in face-to-face counseling services just based on bandwidth of our employees, we will have to slowly reduce the offerings of online counseling services. We still want to meet the demand, and we will still provide those services online, but the more that we bring back to campus, potentially could limit the amount we could offer online. So once again, that's stage 3. That is MPC is open to employees and to all students, but we're not yet having large non-college gatherings on our campus. And to translate this to some of these statewide plans, currently in California, the governor has a 6-step plan to reopen California. Step number 5 or stage number 5 in that plan is to reopen public education. So in looking at potential timelines, MPC would not enter into stage 3 before the governor has enacted and implemented stage 5 of the statewide reopening plan, because ultimately we will not bring all of our students back until public education has the go-ahead from state and local leaders to reopen as part of the broader statewide plan. So with that said, I'll stop there, and I think we're through a large majority of the presentation with one more stage left to go, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on stage number 3. All right, hearing none, we will go down to stage number 4. And this will be our last stage. So ultimately, stage number 4 is MPC's return to normalcy, however normalcy is defined. Ultimately, we would not reach stage 4 until there was widely available testing and or vaccine. And once again, stage 4 is MPC is open to employees and all students and public events. So really, stage 4 is our full return to normal operations. One of the things that I think is important is that as we transition through these stages and as we work through the implementation of this plan over the next several months, that we continue to document and identify the lessons that we're learning, that we have learned, and that we're going to learn, to make sure that even when we get back to normalcy, that we don't lose the knowledge and the information that we're gaining at this point in time, because regardless of what the future may hold and what may happen with the COVID-19 situation, it's our responsibility as an institution to come out of this a safer and healthier place for students to learn. So even though a testing may become available and a vaccination may solve a lot of the situations that we're working through now, as we get back to stage number 4, it's really returning to normalcy, but doing so in a way that is taking our campus-wide safety measures and our campus commitment to a healthy learning environment to the next level, and really coming out of this a better institution to not only serve our students, but the broader community as a whole. So with that said, that concludes the 4-stage implementation plan. As mentioned at the top, this plan is completely subject to change based on future health orders, both by the state and county. And I would like to take a moment to recognize and appreciate our entire campus community, because last week, in numerous public forums, in numerous committee meetings, the engagement throughout our entire campus on the discussions of these plans was really phenomenal, and the campus was engaged. They were participating, and the conversations really ultimately led us to providing the Board of Trustees a better product this evening for your feedback and your input before we finalize the specifics and head off into a very busy summertime. So with that said, I will pause for any questions that the board may have. And I will stop sharing my screen at this point.
All right, is there any board member that has a question? Lauren, is that a hand? Oh, you're muted, go ahead. I can't hear you, there you are.
Okay, so the trouble is I don't know where the microphone is on this thing, so I can get my face right next to it. It has to do with the grading options. I know that the Chancellor's Office has given us new grading options, and you went over some of them. For some period of time, at which point I guess the authorization reverts back to, or goes away, and then we can no longer offer those grading options. My question is actually not to you, but I wonder if and it's early to tell because we haven't had to use the grades yet, because we haven't graded anybody yet. But I'm wondering if our faculty would appreciate keeping those new grading options, if presuming the Chancellor's Office would allow it, essentially encouraging the Chancellor's Office to continue them, if that's a benefit that our faculty perceive. And I know it's hard to answer that question now, but perhaps you can, if you find out anything, you could let us know. Does that make sense?
Sure, and thank you very much for the question, Trustee Stack. And I will definitely seek feedback and input from our faculty leadership on our campus, but I can say that the grading flexibility was really a one-time exemption and a adjustment to Title V regulations. So the chancellor of the California Community College System, Chancellor Oakley, utilized his powers in the state of emergency to reduce and really alleviate some of the parameters in our Title V requirements in regards to when a student can drop a course. What's the process of selecting a withdrawal? What is the process of getting a excused withdrawal, which has no impact on any financial aid? So ultimately, as we look forward into the future semesters, if the chancellor continues to provide that exemption to Title V, we'll absolutely continue to consider that here at MPC. And I think, I'm not speaking with our faculty, but in paraphrasing many of our conversations this spring, our faculty are completely students first. They're student oriented, and I'm sure that they would provide full support to anything that would help our students get through this very challenging time in their educational journey. So without speaking for them directly, I can say that I feel very confident they will do whatever it takes to make the students feel comfortable in pursuing their education here at MPC.
Thank you.
Yuri, you're on mute.
Marilyn, sorry, I was trying to call on you.
Okay. I just wanted to say to David and to all the groups that participated in this, it's a well thought out plan. It's a very responsible plan. It, I would say that it protects our students and it protects our faculty and all employees. And I just want to compliment you all on this plan.
Thank you very much, Trustee Dungustenson.
Trustee Johnson or Trustee Green, did you have any questions or comments? No, none from Rick. Okay. How about you, Student Trustee Mountain? Anything?
Well, I don't think so. I've had my questions. And I'll save them, and I will make a comment relative to the report in my later comments. But I also feel that this is a thoughtful plan. I've participated in a couple of meetings, and it's had a lot of input. So, yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Before we go to the public, I'll just, I want to echo the appreciation and the kudos for how thoughtful this plan is. And the presentation helped make it very clear what's being considered. I would encourage additional thought around, I guess it's stage 3 and stage 4 when you start to have everyone return to work. And I know it has some exceptions or accommodations through HR, but I think we're learning a lot about our ability to engage productively as workers in distance environments, and that we should be continuing that conversation. I know you were getting to this about lessons learned, David, but thinking about how we can continue to support our workforce in particular, and the health of our environment, and our number of vehicle miles traveled, and how much time people are spending in traffic, if we don't necessarily just say, you have to go back to what was normal. Like, let's take this opportunity to have a real conversation about what is the new normal for work as we move forward. Because I think the plan is really good in recognizing that in early stages, there are going to be considerations that people have that may prevent them from being able to return to the workplace or feeling comfortable to do that. And as we spend more time working outside of the confines of our particular office buildings, I think you're going to get more pushback from people about, I don't need to be there to be productive. So I hope that you can continue those sorts of conversations and think about that as it relates to this plan. Because as I hear it, we're going to tell everyone they have to come back to work, and at least in those later stages. From a just kind of an ease perspective, this is really silly, but we've got the state phases and the state stages, and we have MPC stages. So maybe if we can get some language that makes it distinguishable, so you don't have to have we're in state stage 4, but we're in MPC stage 0. So do that qualification might just help in easing the conversations as we have to do this for the next year or something, so we can be really clear. When we talk about butterflies, we're talking about MPC. And then I know that you alluded to it, but I hope that we would be really clearly referencing that our plan is in every way subjugated to whatever is happening from state and local health guidance, and that we are always referencing that back to make the decisions about what we're doing. And I think just being really clear about that is helpful for me personally. But I think Trustee Mountain maybe asked about where we are in comparison to other colleges and districts. It seems like this would be an opportunity for us to reach out to some of our neighboring colleges and districts and say, hey, you know what, we've been working really hard, and here's something that we're putting together and we're producing, and we wanted to share it with you to help get them down the road, because we share our student population across this entire region. And to whatever extent that we could be helping to create a continuity of experience for students as they're thinking about either coming to MPC or Hartnell, or they're taking classes in all the different community college, it can just, I think, help people's lives. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of be a leading partner with our local community, because it is a really well thought out plan, and I can tell that you all spent a tremendous amount of time doing it, and I'm so incredibly thankful to be seeing it. And I saw Rosalind's hand go up while I was participating. Rosalind?
Thank you, Yuri. I was a little slow on the unmute when you were asking if we had comments. So, but I actually lowered my hand because I too wanted to emphasize and show appreciation to the thoughtfulness that has gone into this. But Yuri, you actually hit on 2 really important things that I wanted to bring up, which was the simplicity in the language so that it's not confusing was one, and also the reaching out to the neighboring colleges to kind of share and get feedback and see what they're doing, if there's something that we can give to them or if there's something that we can mirror from them. And then lastly, I wanted to just touch on the comment or question from Lauren, and then the comment that David gave back in regards to the grading system. And I also emphasize again on the importance of really continuing this conversation, keeping in mind the digital divide that has been created with this now normal, and just making sure that we are doing everything that we can to continue to capture our entire audience of students, because I know that there are a lot of challenges that come along with online or distance learning for those students that may need a little more of the face-to-face instruction. So, but again, this is great, and thank you all so much for doing a great job, and just continue to work hard, and I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Okay, so is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on this item? Can *9 to raise your hand if you're on the phone, or just a little icon.
It's a wonderful presentation in a very complex situation. It was done very clearly.
Thank you, Marlene. All right, if we're not seeing anyone else wishing to speak, this is just an information item, so we will consider the plan received and just lots of appreciation. And the time is 5:26, so I'm going to use my chair's prerogative to call it 5:30 and say that we are now going to take our 10-minute break. So we will reconvene at 5:40. So if you all want to mute yourselves and stop your videos and stretch, now's a good time to do it.
Thank you. adding to. Yeah. That'll be okay. Actually, my English one, your final, they did a pretty good job.
You were mentioning it, but
Yeah.
they seem like they did well.
Yeah, they stayed with it. A lot of them wrote good drafts too.
Oh, that's good.
We'll see.
All righty, it looks like it's 5:40 and I see Trustee Stack, Trustee Green, Trustee Dunn Gustafson, Trustee Johnson. I don't see Student Trustee Mountain. Let me see. You there, Robert? We'll give him one more minute before we get going. And Joreen, are we still recording or did you pause the recording?
We're still recording.
Okay. All righty, well, we'll go ahead and get going because I don't know about you guys, but I worked all day, so. All right, so we are on new business item B, approval of a tentative agreement between the MPC College District and California School Employees Association, Chapter 245, for the contract effective July 1, 2017 to June 30, 2020. Mr. Martin, can you give us a brief summary of what we're doing here?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And the item in front of the board this evening is a conclusion of the 2017 through 2020 contract with our classified CEA partners. Part of the contract closure is identifying any areas that need reopening prior to the termination or the discussion of a new contract starts. So ultimately, there are 3 items in which we worked in partnership with our CSCA folks to identify. Those were the association rights, leaves, and benefits. Ultimately, the language that was added does not have any financial value, but ultimately aligns our practices with state legal guidance, provides our classified employees with 10+ years of service the opportunity to obtain a parking permit once they retire, and ultimately, lastly, provide a free-flowing expectation of what employee information is shared between MPC and CSEA. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the reopening articles.
Is there any member of the board who has a question on this item? Did we lose Rosalind? I'm not seeing her on my screen anymore.
No, I'm here.
Okay, good. All right, seeing none, we'll take it to the public. Any member of the public have a question or comment on this item? If you could raise your hand or press *9 and we'll recognize you. All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion. Saw Lauren's lips move. I didn't hear anything. I think he said so moved.
Second.
All right. All right. Well, I heard Trustee Green before Trustee Dunn Gustafson. So we can have a roll call vote, please.
Chair Anderson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Steck,
Aye. Can you hear me?
Trustee Green,
Aye.
Trustee Dunn Gustafson,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
and Student Trustee Robert Mountain.
Aye.
Thank you, unanimous.
Great. All right, so next we'll move on to item 6C. It's an action item. Approve the memorandum of understanding between MPC College District and California School Employees Association, Chapter 245, regarding the 2017 through 2020 contract extension. Mr. Martin?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And very briefly, as previously discussed, our existing CBA with our classified leadership is ending June 30th of this year. We had full intentions to work together to have a subsequent contract to the board prior to this contract terminating, but ultimately with the transition to online instruction and the closure of our campus, meeting the June 30th deadline just was not feasible. So ultimately, the board is being asked to consider a 3-month extension of our existing agreement, so we have time to work together over the summer on a successor contract.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, any questions or comments from the public? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the MOU contract
So
extension.
moved. So moved.
Second?
Trustee Johnson, Trustee Dunn Gustafson, and a roll call vote, please.
Chair Anderson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Steck, Trustee Green,
Aye.
Trustee Dunn Gustafson,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Student Trustee Mountain.
Aye.
Thank you, that's unanimous.
Great, thank you. All right, next we are going to recess the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees and reconvene into a public hearing. for the Sunshine and Successor Agreements. So I'm going to recess our meeting at 5:46 p.m. and then call to order a public hearing. And between the Monterey Peninsula Community College District and MPCEA CSEA Sunshine Successor Agreements for 2020 through 2023. Mr. Martin, can you give the public a brief explanation of what we're doing here?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And as part of the beginning stages of successor bargaining with our classified partners, the board is being asked to approve the sunshine letters from both the MPCSEA and MPC. Ultimately, these letters are in broad brushstrokes, the areas that the areas that may want to be covered in successor discussions in regards to an agreement. As interest-based bargaining continues throughout the summer, the district, along with CSCA, will identify specific areas within those broad brushstroke items and really focus the conversations on those. But these two letters provide us the legal opportunity to discuss anything that is included in either our sunshine letter, the district, as well as the MPCSEA sunshine letter.
And this is really an opportunity for members of the public to make comment on these two sunshine letters, and then we have a separate item for the board. So is there any member of the public that would like to make comment during this public hearing? You can press *9 on your phone or use the raise hand function to be recognized. All right. Seeing none, do you see any? You're not seeing anybody either, Sean or Darlene, are you? Okay. So with that, we will close the public hearing and reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for Monterey Peninsula Community College at 5:48 p.m. and take up new business item 6E, which is an action to adopt the MPCCD and MPCEA's CSEA Sunshine Successor Agreement for 2020-2023. I'll save Mr. Martin from having to explain it again and go directly to any questions from the board. All right, seeing none, is there any member of the public that has a question or comment? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the Sunshine Successor Agreement for 2020-2023.
So move.
Second.
All right, well, I heard Trustee Gustafson for the motion, and I'll take Trustee Steck for the second because it was kind of on top of each other. That, roll call vote, please.
Yes. Chair Anderson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Steck,
Aye.
Trustee Green,
Aye.
Trustee Gustafson,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Student Trustee Mountain,
Yes.
unanimous.
Great, thank you, everybody. All right, so we are now on item 6F, which is action item approval of new programs. Mr. Cannoli, are you in the audience there? Want to tell us about these programs?
Hello, hello. I'm happy to share a little bit of information about the new programs that are on the agenda for you to approve today. We are at the tail end of our catalog production process. We're finalizing the 2021 catalog now, which represents a mountain worth of work that our faculty have put into the curriculum development process over the past year. And we're really excited about the new programs that they have proposed. There were 2 additional programs that we found towards the end of our process that did not get included in our conversion of local certificates to state-approved certificates of achievement. And we wanted to make sure to be able to get these through and completed. By converting the local certificate of training into a state-approved certificate of achievement, it does show up on the transcript, which is a higher level of recognition for the student, and it potentially would count for the student-centered funding formula, unlike the local certificates of training. So this was a great move by our faculty to propose the conversion of these programs. And I would anticipate that you will have the entire catalog presented at your next board meeting for your approval if all goes as planned.
Thank you. Is there any member of the board that has a question on the item before us? Dr. Nolan, can you just say whether is there any change to the number of units or courses that need to be taken when you move from a local certificate to the state approved certificate?
There's actually a range of course units that can be included in certificates of achievement. As low as 8 units can now become a state recognized certificate of achievement. However, 16 units or greater is the threshold for it to qualify under the student-centered funding formula.
Okay, thanks. All right, are there any other questions or comments from board members?
I guess I just would like to know when the students are in this on this pathway to receive the certificate of achievement, who are they practicing their hours on? Because I would like to volunteer. Just kidding. I just wanted to say that. No.
We actually have a fine program and a wonderful leadership under a faculty member in massage therapy, and they do extend the ability or offer to do massages for faculty and staff on campus. And so we'll certainly be able to share that information with you in the future as soon as they're able to return safely to their massage labs.
She's clapping at you. Awesome. All right, is there any member of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment on this item?
They used to have a setup where people could go get massages. They don't do that anymore. I mean, you could just sign up. I know if it was just faculty and staff, but it was very pleasant.
Yes, that is still available. When we are able to be on campus in person, that is certainly something that our students get to take advantage of the practice, and our community loves to be able to have that, that opportunity to engage with our students. So wonderful service.
Okay. Okay, so this is an action item. So would entertain a motion to approve the new courses, Massage Therapist Certificate of Achievement and Sustainable Food and Beverage Management Certificate of Achievement.
So moved.
Trustee or Student Trustee Mountain.
Second.
Trustee Green. Roll call vote, please. Aye. You're on mute, Jeremy. I'm just reading your lips.
You'd think after all of this practice that I've had this week. Chair Anderson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Steck? Trustee Green?
Aye.
Trustee Johnson?
Aye.
Trustee Dunn Gustafson?
Aye.
Student Trustee Mountain?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you. I was told that my mic was a little low. Can you hear me better now? Right.
Yep.
Okay. It's not too loud?
No, it's great.
Okay. All right. Because I've had a few people scream in my ear during these and I'm just like, whoa. All right.
Increase your mic. How do you increase the volume of your mic? That's what
it's in your, well, mine has this little thing here because I'm using a headset, but there's a sound mixer on your device that would let you go to your microphone somewhere in there. Yeah.
All right.
All right, so we're going to go on to item 6G, an action item. Approve letters supporting financial assistance for undocumented students to mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and endorsing California Community College's May 2020 lawsuit against the Secretary of Education. Mr. Martin?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And the letter that's in front of the board this evening for consideration is a letter that continues the steadfast support that our board has shown for our undocumented student population, not only here at MPC, but throughout the state of California. Most recently, the federal government approved the CARES package, which provided COVID-19 relief funding to students. That package did not clearly identify DACA students as eligible recipients of those funds. So ultimately, we would like the board to consider this letter as a means of advocating for our DACA students in COVID-19 relief funding, not only presently, but also in the future. Additionally, the Chancellor's Office last week filed a lawsuit against the federal government to ensure that future conversations regarding COVID-19 relief funding includes our DACA students, because as we all know, they are a vital part to our community and the entire system of education as a whole. So I would ask the board for their consideration of this letter, and then pending potential approval, we would send it off to our legislators to signify our support for DACA funding for our students during this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? I just wanted to clarify that the distinction between DACA and undocumented, and to make sure that our letter of support was really speaking to both of those populations, because we do have persons who aren't protected by the Deferred Childhood Action that are just undocumented who continue to be students.
Thank you for that point of clarification, Chair Anderson, and we will make sure that the final letter includes both DACA and undocumented students as distinct populations.
I mean, I see that the language is in there. I just wanted to make sure that we understood in our minds that we weren't just talking about DACA, but we were talking about all undocumented students potentially.
I will happily move approval of this letter.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion, or sorry, questions or comments from the public on the motion?
I think it's wonderful that you're doing it. It's really important.
Thank you. Marlene, if I could just ask, make sure you raise your hand and wait to be called on. Yeah, just,
okay.
Thanks. But thank you. We agree, or I do. All right. See, is there any final comments from board members before we vote? All right, seeing none, we can have a roll call vote, please.
Chair Anderson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stack,
Yes.
Trustee Green,
Aye.
Trustee Dungussen,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Student Trustee Mountain.
Aye.
It is unanimous.
Thank you. Forward to being able to sign that letter or have you stamp our names on it. All right, so next we're on item H, was an information item. California may revise an MPC budget assumptions. So I don't know if this is David or Steve.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and it'll be a combination of both, but Steve will take the lead in the beginning, and as I give him a couple moments to grab the screen and prepare the board for the presentation this evening, I wanted to just lay the initial framework that the May revision is a significant part of the state's budget development cycle. Governor Newsom released his May revise on time 2 weeks ago on May 14th. The May revision is very important to this budget cycle because ultimately it is our first true look into the impacts of COVID-19 on our state's economy, as well as how that impact at the state level may trickle down to local community college districts, and MPC being one of those. So as Steve has now grabbed the screen, I'll turn it over to Vice President Hagler for the presentation on the 2021 May revise.
Great, thank you. So the May revise, we had an opportunity last week to present this at a public forum. So this is the second time that I've done kind of the same slide deck. I know a couple of board members attended that, so I apologize for any redundancy. This is important information, so I'll start with the slide deck. I'll share an update on the May revise, and then I'll follow that with a second document, which is our draft budget assumptions for our tentative budget. So what I'd like to go over is there's a couple of impacts here. The 1920 budget is impacted, and as well as the governor's proposal for 2021. So I'll take a moment to talk about the 1920 impact first, and then I'll talk about 2021 and how COVID-19 has impacted the statewide budget and its impacts on MPC. So for the 1920, so when the year started, the governor established a budget based on Proposition 98 for K-12 and community colleges. And Prop 98 represents the pie of resources that are allocated to all the community college districts. Now, just like us, the actuals that they have in relation to revenues has changed through this year. When he presented his budget back in January, the economy was storming along, and by the middle of March, we were in a sharp decline. So the result of that is an actual reduction to the available revenues at the state level to fund Prop 98 for the 1920 year. And he has a couple of techniques he'll use in that, and I have slides on it. But primarily, one of the impacts in the current year was they deferred, they moved back the personal income tax due date from middle of April to middle of July. So ordinarily, property taxes come in April, and at the state level, their primary income, which is personal income tax, would have come in also early on before the governor got to the May revise. Sales tax and corporate tax are other components of about 80% of the state revenues from those big three items. And so personal income taxes have been impacted. Property taxes, on the other hand, are relatively similar to what they were at the January budget. They're only down 0.6% from his January proposal. So this unknown now results in one of the techniques that the governor proposes in his May revise, which is deferrals. And of course, we all remember deferrals from the last time that there was a decline in the economy. And so that's a way for the state to push an appropriation into the next fiscal year. They basically unappropriated in 1920, and they move it into the 2021 budget, and then we get our payment in 2021. So that's a tried and true technique for the state to manage sharp declines in the budget that they're going to employ again this year. Talk just a second about 1920 for MPC. So this is the latest financial as of Monday. And so you can see this is MPC's general fund, unrestricted. And so we had budgeted for $44.7 million in revenues from federal, state, and local sources. And we had also budgeted for 40.7 in expenditures. So we effectively had a balanced budget. To date, we've recorded 39.3 million in revenue, 24.6 of that coming from local sources, which includes property taxes and enrollment fees, and 14.7 from state. So we are expecting to receive these revenues, and ultimately we think we'll be pretty close to budget by the close of the fiscal year. Down in expenditures, we've incurred $40,439,728 to date, but we have payroll for the month of June to come, and probably a substantial number of contract type payments that will also happen either during the month of June or in the closing process in July and August. So it looks pretty good. I think our budget is in line with what our actuals are kind of in line with what our budget is. So that's MPC for this year. Ultimately, when it comes to the recording of the deferrals, we'll be booking a receivable. While we won't receive the cash, we will record the revenue. Well, what has COVID-19 done? Well, we have now entered into a recession. We have a nosedive in the economy. It affects the budget forecast for the entire state. It affects his January proposal. He talked about in January that he had a $5.6 billion state surplus. And he talked a lot about how he was going to use that surplus, creating new programs and such with a focus on healthcare and homelessness, et cetera. Well, that 5.6 billion statewide surplus has now completely vanished. In fact, even the reserves that the state had created, in particular the Prop 2 Rainy Day Fund, which was approved by voters back in 2014, during this 1920 year, they had actually made their first payment towards that reserve fund. And now they will immediately be drawing those reserves into the 1920 year. I suppose that's a good thing for us. It means that we don't have cuts during 1920. Ultimately, they think that they will have sufficient money to pay Prop 98 portion of the state's budget. It should be pretty close. They have these plans were called their recession resiliency. It's a great thing that they did them, that they planned for them. That goes all the way back to Governor Brown. And COVID-19's impact is unprecedented and adds this element of unknown for future years' state revenues. So let's take a little bit of a look at the state budget outlook. Now this is for K through 14, so this is the Prop 98 pie for K2 through 12 plus the community colleges. So back in January, the general fund proposal was 57.6 million. It's down to 44.9 by the May revise, and that's a shortfall of 22%. Property taxes relatively stable, 26.5 in January, 25.6 at the May revise, just down 3%. The overall decrease of the pie was 16%. Out of that Prop 98 pie, there is what they call the community college split, and it remains at 10.93%, same as it was in January. Ultimately, the governor started his May revise by talking about state budget shortfall, and the number that he put on that was $54 billion statewide. Of course, a number of sources review and come up with their own estimates. One of them would be school services, and one of them would be the LAO's office, and the chancellor's office, and ACBO and ACA. Ultimately, the numbers that I'm using in my presentation came from the joint presentation that was put on by the chancellor's office, ACA and ACBO. And I'll stay consistent with that throughout the budget process. Revenues are estimates, so depending on who's making the estimate, they can come up with different numbers, different percentages, and somewhat different theories. So the governor, even though he's telling us now all of this bad news about Prop 98 and the decline, he reiterated some expectations for community colleges. So I thought I'd communicate those as well. And top of the list is maintaining levels of access, especially for underrepresented students. It is what we do at community colleges. We sometimes serve the most needy of students. And so even with more limited resources than we've had over the past couple of years, we have to be very mindful of that and focus our efforts on doing that. He expects us to maintain our workload levels, maintain our FTEs, expand and improve our online programs. Of course, that was the task of the spring, was developing online programs. He talked about a collaboration statewide between the colleges on a common learning management system. He expects that to continue. He wants to explore competency-based learning and credit by examination and expand shared open educational resources. So the word from the governor is, again, to community colleges to do more with less. And I think we've all heard that many times. So here's a look at Prop 98 just for community colleges. So the general fund back in January, the governor proposed 5.6 billion. It may revise down to 4.3. Property taxes were at 3.4 billion. They're down to 3.3. And the total budget went from 9 billion down to 7.6 billion, a 16% reduction. He did talk about some things, the student center funding formula. He talked about maintaining the 1920 rates. He also talked about extending hold harmless for, I believe it was 2 years. I suppose that's good news to us, but again, when your Prop 98 pie shrinks, you have less resources anyway. And so we're impacted by that. Categorical programs also take a big hit in this, and I got a slide coming up where I'll talk about that. The first thing that he pulled off of his January proposal was the 2.29% COLA. Right after he came out with that 2.29% COLA, there was a revision that came out from the federal government, increasing it to 2.31. But effectively, he's rescinding his January proposal, and the COLA that we can expect for this next year is 0. So many of our categorical programs also benefit by that COLA, so they will not have a benefit because they'll get a 0% COLA as well. He pulled growth off. He was proposing 0.5% of enrollment growth. And then the really bad news was an approximate 8% reduction in the student-centered funding formula. Again, he did try to lighten it a little bit by talking about extending the hold harmless for us. The biggest categorical hit was to the strong workforce program. It's being reduced by 55%. And he talked about making the funding statewide $100 million level and keeping it there. So there were already, I believe, plans in place to pull back on some of the strong workforce, and now there's bigger plans to pull back on the strong workforce program. He did have a caveat in here. There's some funds outside of Prop 98 that will be used by the state to pay down CalPERS and CalSTRS. So there's careful wording here, but it's a reduction in CalPERS and CalSTRS scheduled increases. So we may all remember that after the last recession in the economy, STRS and PERS investments really went south. They made new actuarial determinations and decided that they needed to increase rates to employers and employees so that these pension plans could sustain themselves. And the rates rose from 8% up to peaks up over 20%, very, very sharp increases. And so Gavin Newsom in the last year made a concerted effort to buy down those rates by making long-term obligation payments that the state had to them. He was successful in doing that. And he's again proposing it here to help us out by reducing the rates. When I get to the budget assumptions documents, I actually have those rates on the budget assumption, and I'll talk a little more about them. So the community college projections also impact other categorical type programs. We have a reduction in support for the campus food pantry, reduction for part-time faculty office hour funding, reductions for Dreamer resource liaisons, elimination of instructional equipment funding for dual enrollment students. Now, that program in particular back in January was a brand new program where he was proposing to help pay for textbooks and instructional equipment for dual enrolled students. So now he's just pulling back. That when he had a bunch of money at a big $5.6 billion surplus, he was in create programs kind of mode, and now he's basically just rescinding everything that he had in the January proposal, except for this next item. He is maintaining legal service funding for undocumented students. He's also maintaining the California Promise program. So all of these represent reductions except for the legal services funding and the good news related to the California Promise. So what are the next steps? Well, because of COVID-19, the legislatures weren't meeting. And so all of those budget hearings that would have been going on after the governor gave his January proposal, they didn't happen. And so and also because of the revenue forecast and the uncertainty in revenues. The state still plans on moving forward with a budget by June 15th, but now they're talking about coming out with a revision to that as early as August and as late as September. They call that a budget bill junior. And with that, the Chancellor's Office put out a memo granting us an extension of our time frame for the tentative budget to July 31st and of our final adopted budget to October 31st. Now, it's important to me to communicate to you that if we don't have a tentative budget in place by July 1, then we don't have an operating budget. So I fully intend to bring to you in the June board meeting our tentative budget. But we will have time in the fall, a little bit of a reprieve, and have to complete and have the board approve the adopted budget by October 31st, which is well into the fall. Normally it would be due on September 15th. So with that, that's my state budget presentation. Of course, if anybody has questions that can't be answered here, you want to reach out to me directly. I'm providing my contact info. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing this document. And if there's any questions from the board, I'd be happy to entertain them. So I'm going to go over and look at the, well, I guess I'll defer to you, Yuri. Do any of the board members have questions that I can answer?
Any questions from the board? I had a couple, and you may not be able to answer them, but just kind of put them out there. So as it really, and this, I don't think it'll come with the assumptions, but as it relates to the 8% reduction to the student-centered funding formula, was there any more detail about how that is parsed out between the different buckets of that formula? So do we, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually, yeah, there was a follow-up presentation done by the Chancellor's Office, and they talked about it, and there is a little bit of uncertainty, but Chancellor's Office said it was 10% less the COLA. So in my budget assumptions, which is the next document I'll talk about, I'll talk specifically about the components of that, the buckets and the dollar amounts that is. So I have made a revised calculation, and I'm ready to move forward.
Okay. And I guess a similar, as it relates to your calculation. So the cut to the strong workforce program by 55%, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to me in where we are in the world, why you would do that, but that's neither here nor there. But do we have a sense of how that is going to impact MPC in particular?
That question I don't have a particular answer to today.
Mm-hmm.
And
are those, is that categorical funding or is it application funding or?
Yes, so strong workforce is accounted for in the restricted general fund. And so just in general, when I bring forward a tentative budget, the restricted general fund, the way it operates is that for every dollar of restricted money that you spend in accordance with whatever the rules are for the program, you recognize a dollar of revenue. So ultimately, I'll be bringing to you a tentative budget that is relatively balanced. The restricted general fund should not increase or decrease so much. And as information comes in now over the summer and into the fall, which is very typical for categorical programs, internally, the Strong Workforce Program group will be making revisions to their budget and updating. But again, every time they do that, they'll be proposing a budget that's basically balanced as well. If they have less resources. And ultimately, that program will need to look at, you know, what positions they have charged there, what extra type of activities they're trying to fund. I'm quite sure they probably have a carryover coming from the 1920 year as well. But this is definitely troubling for them and a very significant cut.
I see David trying to add something to this conversation.
Yes, if I may, Chair Anderson, thank you very much for the question regarding strong workforce funds, because ultimately that's a large component of what we do here at MPC. Right now, the reduction of 55% is being applied to the statewide pot. the statewide pot gets allocated to regions as well as local districts. So right now, the California Community College system is working with the CCLC to advocate that the district's allocation at the local level do not bear any of those costs, because ultimately we are responsible for implementing, developing, and training our students and their programs. So there'll be more information to come, but ultimately as a system, we are making advocacy efforts to not see any of that reduction at the local community college level.
Okay. And then my final question is related to the elimination of the COLA. And again, this may not be something you can answer today, but when we were engaging in our contract negotiations with the MPCTA, the COLA came into play on how we ended up being able to finance increases in salary. And so I'm wondering where we are in looking at that being brought to zero as it relates to moving forward with our contractual agreements.
Right, you're exactly right. So it is a component of the contract, and as such, the COLA for this year would be zero. That doesn't mean that faculty don't always get pay increases. In fact, they progress across the salary schedule, getting annual step increases. But if you're at the top of the salary schedule, then there won't be an increase coming from COLA this year. Of course, this is early. Again, it's just the governor's proposal at this point, and we really need to wait and see what the state finalizes by the time they adopt their budget in June.
Thanks. All right, so if there's no more questions on this, we'll let Mr. Hagler do the next part of his presentation and then have more questions from the board and then have the public be able to participate. So go ahead, Steve.
So again, I'm going to grab the screen and share a document. Okay, so here's tentative budget assumptions, and I was working on this over the weekend and to get it onto the board agenda, and David helped me with it as well. So it's broken down between general assumptions, revenue assumptions, and expenditure assumptions. So in our general assumptions, we have board policy to deal with. Board policy 6200 requires a balanced budget. Board policy 6210 requires us to maintain an adequate reserve at 10%. And then the state-centered funding formula, we're going to hold harmless. So that's a significant assumption going into our budget this year, as well as next year, and maybe the year after that now. Number 4 is a really important one. So our budget, even at a time when we may need to make significant reductions, needs to be developed using equity-based principles. And again, going back to what the governor reiterated to us is we have to make sure that in how we do that. And so in developing the budget, I'm looking at this and trying to make proposals possibly for reductions that avoid any kind of equity consequences. And so I have to be very mindful of it, and I get it, and this is what I'll do. Also, we have our educational master plan as a general assumption. So we want to drive forward the initiatives. We have to be able to allocate the resources to continue to move forward as an institution in accordance with that plan. The revenue assumptions, total computation revenue. This is the bucket. And I'm estimating it to be 37.9 million. That takes into account that there's no COLA this year, and it also takes into account the 8% reduction that I've been told. There's a possibility that if Prop 98 continues to go south, that there would be future deficit factors. So there will continue to be an unknown in relation to the revenue assumptions, maybe even throughout the entire fiscal year this year, and maybe even into the year after that. So I'm really hoping for a strong comeback of the economy. The other portions of the bucket, or the portions of the bucket, if you think of total computational revenue as a bucket, we're going to fill it up first with property tax revenues. So I was able to download a property tax estimate at 23 million. That came from the Chancellor's office. I've estimated enrollment fees at 2.6 million. And Proposition 30, I was able to download an exhibit from the Chancellor's office with an estimate of 5.3 million. Of course, those are all estimates, but you add those things up and you take it away from the 37.9, and the remaining portion is what we will get in state revenues, which is just over 7 million right now. Another revenue assumption that we need to include in the budget is lottery. And so that comes off of the Lottery Commission's website, $153 per FTES. So those are the base revenue assumptions, and one of them includes a decline in revenue. So I need to look closely at all revenues and take a look at the assumptions that are built in, and I would really like to be able to show some increases in other types of revenues. Of course, there's the possibility of federal resources being made available sometime in the future that could impact this, but at this point, this is what I have to work with. So I'll be bringing that forward in the tentative budget kind of as is. On the expenditure side, of course, we're going to meet all our contractual obligations. What does that mean is that we'll include those step and salary increases. In fact, we already have. And we look at the positions that are going to retire, and for those positions that we're going to fill, we would include those in the budget as well. So that's good news for our employees. And it is good to work at MPC. I did read an article this morning about the city of Monterey, and they're looking at $13 to $23 million revenue shortfall, and they're talking about significant impacts to their employees. At this time, we're not talking about significant impacts to our employees. Our overall budget reduction is much less than that. So employee pensions. Now, I talked about this a little before, those reductions in the increases in STRS and PERS. So here's the numbers. The governor has proposed 16.15 for STRS, which would be down from 18.4, which was last year's. PERS will be at 20.7. It's up just slightly from the 19.7 in 1920, but down from the school services dartboard projection of what it should have been in 21. We want to continue to budget for benefits, including OPEB, contribution on behalf of our employees. And we will continue to be self-insured and maintain our level of health benefits throughout the year. And we will look to our discretionary budgets, and those will be appropriated based on the available remaining funding after all mandated costs are funded. But again, going back to that, it's got to be done through kind of an equity lens. It's very important that as I work through and discuss with the budget committee, that we be mindful about where any reductions would be. So I think it's doable. I think we're not in bad shape, and I look forward to bringing to you a budget presentation next month with the full tentative budget. And with that, if there are any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions from the board?
It's a much more positive report than, and your attitude is much more positive than I would have anticipated, Steve.
I also have for the board my VPA of Administrative Services, which is a more detailed look at the actual governor's proposal.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't planning to do a presentation on that, but when you get to that report and you have more specific questions, there's definitely much more detail in it about specific line items of the budget.
Lauren?
Steve, can you, I didn't see the second document that you just went over in our agenda. Maybe I missed it, but if that's the one, can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, I think it is on the agenda.
Is
Yeah,
it?
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't see it. I apologize. I somehow missed it. Thanks.
Rosalind, did you want to speak?
I was just speaking to Lauren's question that that last document that Steve was speaking from was there.
Okay.
But also just to really thank you, Steve. I've jumped on a call or two, and the information is so overwhelming in those calls, and you've done a great job in capturing it and bringing it back to us. So I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Trustee Johnson or Student Trustee Mountain, did you have anything you wanted to comment on or ask a question about? Nope, I'm seeing heads shaking no.
Yeah. No, I just agree with Marilyn that, to be honest with you, as much as it hurts, it's far better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not far better, but better.
So I wanted to, also extend my appreciation for the presentation, and I particularly appreciated how clearly outlined the budget assumptions were. I don't remember having had this document at this stage of the game last year. I believe we brought more in later after the budget had been developed. So it's really good to kind of know going into it, what are you starting with, and to feel really comfortable and confident that those general assumptions are in line with our goals and what we're trying to accomplish. I think we might consider, since the governor has articulated an emphasis on underrepresented students, thinking about, we've articulated as equity-based principles, but kind of looking at how those two things interact and making sure that we have a clear sense of what underrepresented is. And I hear that you're doing that in your budget development, but just kind of, they could be slightly different. And that they should both be considered, both from what we hear the state telling us we need to do and what we've locally committed to be doing. And then this is just kind of a question that I don't know about. Do we ever do, and I realize it's hard with so many uncertainties with this budget and hold harmless and whatnot, but do we ever do like a multi-year forecast to start looking out further? Because I know in a presentation I sat in at the county, we had the assessor recorder come before the Board of Supervisors and tell us we're not really going to see property tax impacts as it relates to COVID-19 until 2021, because we've already done the rolls. We've already assessed properties for what the people are going to be charged for 2020, or I guess it'd be 2022. So kind of saying, our property tax hasn't been hit really very much right now, but it could be in a couple of years that we actually see that revenue source drop because of this particular pandemic. And just, are we looking out further as we plan?
I'll defer to David, but yes, we are developing long-term planning.
Thank you very much, Chair Anderson, for that question. We have been working on a 5-year projection over the last several weeks now that we have the updated May revise. Ultimately, we hope to include that 5-year projection as part of the budget packet that comes to the board next month, and then ultimately for final adoption on or before October 31st. But thank you very much for the comment and the very valid point that now is really the time that these 5-year and out-year projections are very important to institutions as we look past not only the first year of impact, but ultimately the potential recession that may linger on past 2021.
All right, so is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on the presentation? This is just an information item today. Can raise your hand or press *9. Marlene, was that a hand? Okay. Go ahead, I think you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Now, again, all I can say was a really good, clear presentation. And with Marilyn, it's not so horrible as one could imagine it could be, we think.
All right, not seeing anyone else. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really incredibly accessible. Makes our job, I think, easier to do.
Thank you. I'll see you next month.
Okay, cool. All right, let's see. We're now on after business item I, information, first reading of 29 board policies. And I'm not sure who to kick that to, if it's Sean or David or Marilyn and Lauren.
If I may jump in and take the first attempt at introducing the item, and thank you very much, Chair Anderson, for the opportunity to present 29 board policies this evening for first reading. These 29 board policies are, for all intents and purposes, the collection of legally updated policies per the CCLC distribution channel. So these policies have been legally updated with new language to reflect new Ed Code, new Title V, new Public Contract Code. Ultimately, those legally updated changes were the only changes proposed in these policies, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. But ultimately, per our board policy in regards to the development of board policies, we do ask, or the board does require 2 readings. So these policies will come back next month for a subsequent reading.
And if I might add, Lauren and I met and talked about the process. We talked about our schedule. And after these policies were very nicely put together by Sean, thank you very much, Sean, and distributed to us, I personally found this worksheet to be very easy to use, to work with, to go back and forth between the policy and the AP, the administrative procedure. And so I would say that Lauren and I had reviewed these. We did not have any comments or changes to what had been presented. And I would say that if board members have comments, we will be happy to take all of those, and then we will meet and discuss them, and we'll bring them back in whatever form works best for the final adoption at the June meeting.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? I just wanted to, the last year we had started gender neutralizing our board policies, and I'm wondering if that, just want to make sure that's being carried forward, even though those aren't technically CCLC guidelines or changes.
Yes, there were several changes that made them gender neutral.
Great. Thank you. All right, not seeing any other board members raising their hands. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on this information item or ask a question? All right, seeing none, we will just move on, and we'll see this next, I guess there's a 30-day minimum between the first reading and the second reading, or no?
Chair Anderson, I believe it just requires 2 readings without a specific amount of time in between those, just 2 agendized readings.
Great, so we'll probably see these back on our next regular board meeting for adoption. Perfect. All right, and then our last regular item is business item J, information item on 10 new administrative procedures. Mr. Martin?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson. And to conclude our new business section this evening, we do have 10 newly drafted administrative procedures to present to the board as information. Ultimately, these procedures were born out of our participatory governance process, and Vice President Hagler did a wonderful job in working with the Administrative Services Advisory Group, as well as our President's Advisory Group and the Academic Senate, to make sure that our entire campus had the opportunity to engage and participate in these board policies and administrative procedures, or excuse me, administrative procedures. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have on the 10 administrative procedures proposed as information this evening.
All right. Questions from the board? Big no from Marilyn. My only question relates to, is more about the board policy and I guess the AP and funding on the parking policy. And it's more of trying to how we help our community and our students have more access. Do we have any plan in place to upgrade all of our parking permit machines to either accept credit cards or some sort of digital wallet or some other way to pay besides cash? Or that just the one that takes debit card?
Thank you very much, Chair Anderson, for the question. And I smile because the answer is yes. And right before we encountered the shelter-in-place mandate, we had started those discussions about alternative parking machines that we could use that are much more up-to-date and user-friendly. So I think that once we get groups back on campus and are able to engage in a campus-wide conversation, because we have a wide variety of groups that use those machines, we do hope to eventually bring a contract to the board with some new concepts on how we can streamline our parking pass issuance.
Cool. Well, I guess I wasn't talking about pass, I was talking about day use parking, but anyway.
And the day use as well.
Okay, cool. All right, is there any member of the public that had a question or comment on these administrative procedures? Star 9 or that little blue hand? Seeing none, we will deem the administrative procedures accepted. All right, so we are on to item 7, reports and presentations, starting with Superintendent President's report. Mr. Martin.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson, and I'll be brief, but I wanted to refer to the monthly mailbag and really just take a moment to highlight a semester of just brilliance in many different ways. We had a long list of champions on our campus, from our faculty, from our staff, from our administrators. And I wanted to take a moment to not only recognize them, but also thank the Governing Board of Trustees for your leadership during this time. Ultimately, the steadfast and consistent leadership that we were provided each month really helped us operationalize some of the things that we needed to do and be able to move quickly as we navigated through this challenging time. So I just wanted to extend my sincere thank you to an entire campus, because ultimately I am in a position of being able to speak with a lot of the students, and the student feedback that I've heard over the last several weeks in regards to what the faculty is doing for them, or what our classified team is putting together so that they can get the technology that they need is truly inspiring. So I hope that I can articulate in a way that justifies the compliments that our entire campus is receiving, and really just send a quick note of thanks for a wonderful spring semester. Although it didn't end as originally planned, I think that we as an entire campus and entire community can look back on how MPC reacted to the situation with a lot of pride and a lot of encouragement as to what's to come for this institution as we move forward. So with that said, I promise to be brief, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Questions from the board? Comments on David's report? Marilyn's trying to unmute. All right, I think you can unmute yourself, Marilyn. We can't hear you.
All right, I was pressing the space bar down, but it didn't work that time. Anyway, I would just like to know, David, how widely the mailbag is distributed. I think it's excellent. Obviously, it comes to us, and obviously it goes to faculty and staff, but is there a wider distribution for it?
That's a great question, Chair Gustafson, and at this point, we are distributing it through our MPC email channels. But ultimately, that's something we can explore over the summertime on potentially how we can get it out to a broader group. If board members are asked about the availability, it is posted on the MPC President's webpage. But ultimately, I think we can definitely find alternative avenues through email to find a bigger audience to let them know what we're up to here at MPC.
I would recommend that it also be distributed to the MPC Foundation board, Becky.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to forward it on to the foundation board, Marilyn.
Thank you. I think it's terrific.
I agree.
It is really great. The other thing I've been wondering about is we get those great kind of after action reports for our board meeting that, you know, go to the campus community, and I'll share those out. But if there's a way for people to kind of indicate I'd like to be included on the general distribution list for these, I'm not sure how to tell them to do that other than, oh, I'll post it and share it. But so they're getting it directly.
And thank you very much for that comment as well, Chair Anderson. I think that in the immediate future, if anybody would like a copy of that, please put them in contact with me. But ultimately, we can work with Kristen Darkin in our Public Information Office to identify a way to sign up to become part of the listserv.
Cool. All right, anybody else have a question or comment on the Superintendent President's report? By anyone, I mean anyone. All right, seeing none. Thank you, David. MPC Office of Advancement report. Ms. Michael.
Yes, good evening. So you also have a written report in your packet from me. I'd like to just touch on a couple of things. First, I did mention that I would provide some more specific information about the results of our direct mail appeal letter. So far, we've raised over $25,000 through that appeal, and we've received more than 60 individual gifts, many of whom are new donors who've been in our database for many, many years, and this was the first time that they chose to respond with a donation. So we do feel as though it's been tremendously successful, and just based on our experience with mailings in the past, this one seems to be pretty high up there in terms of the results. So we're incredibly grateful for that. It's also managed to connect us with some MPC alumni that we hadn't previously been aware of or connected with, who have included notes in their donation envelopes or with their online donations, just letting us know how when they were at MPC, they really benefited from the foundation's support and received scholarships, or just had a really wonderful faculty member or a wonderful experience in general at MPC, and now they'd like to give back. And we did feature one student in one of our e-newsletters that goes out because it was just such a heartwarming story. It was a woman who's now working as a nurse at Montage Health, and she had received 4 or 5 scholarships from the foundation when she was going to MPC, and she was a single parent and working nights and going to school, and now she's on the giving end. So it's just really great to see someone come full circle and at the same time serving the community in such a meaningful way during this time. So just wanted to touch on that. And then moving through the report, I mentioned we've raised over $25,000 through the mailing, but we've also secured another 33 specifically for the COVID Relief Fund through grant proposals. And we have several more in the works, so you can see a full list there. Surprisingly, no events planned at this time, but more to come on that. You can see the incredible growth of our scholarship program and the numbers there that I put in the table just to provide some comparisons for previous years. Going from 2018, where we had 450 students who started applications, to this year over 1,000. And Gina Bianchi again has been doing those scholarship workshops, working with other folks on campus, and it's just been amazing to see the growth. Also just wanted to highlight the great news that we were able to secure a PPP loan, which is fully forgivable if we use it towards eligible payroll expenses for our foundation employees. So the full amount that we requested was funded, and we're just really, really grateful for that. It provides a lot of stability for the foundation in a very unstable time. Moving on to marketing and communications, just want to recognize that, or just point out that we had our first marketing committee meeting, and thank everybody. We had full attendance at that Zoom meeting, and we had a lot to cover, including some of the bullet points that I included in my report, just a summary of the things that we have currently running, and you can see everything from a direct mail to digital ads to print ads in the weekly, radio commercials on numerous stations. We're now posting twice daily to all of our social media accounts. We also have a television commercial that's running right now. We just did a postcard mailing promoting fall and summer, because the fall and summer print summer schedules are usually very close together, and this year we spaced them out and we put a postcard in between. So trying to hit people from all different angles, and feeling really good about the results that we're seeing on those so far. I saw a report on our digital ads recently where we are blowing the national averages out of the water. It's in like 14 times the national average for click-throughs that we're getting on our digital ads. So it's obviously a great time to be advertising online. Most people are spending more time online these days than they were before the shelter in place, and so we've really emphasized those areas to help get the word out about MPC. So, and then I just wanted to touch on, because you raised in your last report some questions for President Martin about emails, and if you look in that bullet point 4, longer term projects, customer relationship management or CRM platform and email campaign tools. Those two things they've been on our radar for some time, and Kristen and I are doing some research into different products that are available, and we'll be working with the marketing committee to bring forward a recommendation. But essentially what that is something like Constant Contact, but far more sophisticated, where we would be able to not only collect people's email addresses, but segment them based on their behaviors and their interest levels. So if somebody is specifically interested in career and tech ed, we could target emails to that group versus another group that maybe is for high school parents or something like that. So we have that on our radar, and definitely recognize we have a huge need for it at the college, and it's going to be a great tool to help us be in better communication with the community, not just for promoting enrollment, but just to make people aware of all of the great work that is being done on our campus. So I look forward to having more details to share with you on that, but just wanted to circle back and let you know that we are, as President Martin said, working on that, and we'll be looking to implement a solution in our next budget cycle.
Thank you, Becky. Robert's had his hand up for a while. Student Trustee Mountain.
Back under grants, the Title V, that roughly $3 million for DHSI, was that a straight line? I mean, evenly distributed over 5 million, over 5 years?
It's close to straight, but it's not exact to the dollar, but yes, it is essentially, because the way that they structure the grant is there's a specific amount, there's a maximum per year. And so we went for almost the maximum per year minus the $7 there that would have made it a 3 million even.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We do hope we expect to hear back on that grant proposal by probably August, maybe July.
Any other questions or comments for Becky? I just want to say that I've been seeing the social ads, and I got my postcard, and hearing MPC on the radio and TV commercials, and I'm just really loving the look and the feel of those communications, and feel like they seem really right on with the community of folks that we have out here in Trustee area, that being able to hear those voices and see those faces and imagine themselves as Lobos. So
excellent.
Really excited for your committee.
I appreciate that feedback. And you just reminded me of something, Trustee Anderson, I forgot to mention, and I wanted to specifically thank Teddy Eck as well as Kristen for the great idea. Teddy Eck, our theater instructor, provided the voiceover for that television commercial. And so that's one of the things he teaches, right? And so we were able to utilize his professional skills, and he did such an amazing job. Kristen arranged to mail him the equipment to his home so that he could do the recording from home. And then patch that into the video. And we're looking to work more closely with the theater department to record. We have had theater students before record our radio ads. Didn't want to do that at this point because of the risks involved, but we will be working with them more and more to include them in our marketing efforts. So it's kind of a fun using our own to promote the school.
Awesome. All right. Marilyn?
Yes, I was just going to say, Becky, great report. And I loved the student stories that you share with the foundation donors and with us. And then the other thing is I wanted everyone to be aware of how thoughtful your office was in helping Monterey Rotary to identify scholarship recipients and to get us the information we needed. So thank you to you and thank you to Gina.
I will pass that along. Actually, I think she may be on the call, so she probably just heard you. But if not, I'll make sure she knows. And you're welcome. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has a question or comment on the Office of Advancement report before we move on? All right, moving on. Thank you, Becky. All right, so now we have the Academic Affairs report. Dr. Cannoli.
Hello again. You have my written report, and I will just point out a couple of brief things and then open it up to questions. I did want to acknowledge that at the end of this very interesting, very challenging semester, in addition to making it to the end and doing the best that we absolutely can, we are saying goodbye to 2 current faculty members. And I had to include Mr. Schutzler as well, who is not currently a faculty member, but is serving as an interim dean, but has been a very long time faculty member here at MPC, and just recognize the incredible work that these 3 individuals have done over their time at MPC. And I'm sure that they're all feeling mixed feelings about going out on this particular note, but I hope that the end of this semester doesn't diminish the recognition that they received for the really great things that they've done here at MPC, working with our students. So Dr. Andres Durstenfeld in biology, Mark Clements from adaptive physical education, and of course, Lyndon Schutzler, who is our current interim dean, but has been a longtime faculty member in physical education as well. Those 3 individuals have contributed a lot to this campus. I've been here about 8 years, and since I got here, they've been present in everything that we've done, and we rely on all of them as pretty amazing, outstanding leaders on campus as well. And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge them in my report for the month. In addition to that, I wanted to provide a little bit of a note about looking ahead. We are just a couple of weeks away from the summer term, and we have a very amazing turnout for enrollment in the summer classes. All of our summer classes are online, as you know. We made that very tough decision to go online ahead of summer, and our students are sticking it out with us. And we know that it's not what everybody prefers, but it's what they can count on, and it's what we can make sure that they can access and be successful with. Our summer courses are stronger than most prior summers that I've been able to experience here at MPC, and we continue to add additional sections. We've just in the past week or so added more anatomy, speech, Spanish, psychology, and geology, and even photography, which we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do art classes online, but those that have been able to make that transition are doing really well, and the students are excited to be able to continue with those classes. So our enrollment for summer is close to 50 FTES over what it was last summer, so that's a pretty good sign. With the information that President Martin shared earlier about our fall plans, we are in the process of making adjustments to our fall 2020 schedule. We're going to be moving more of our instruction online to be proactive. And so the fall schedule is in flux a little bit, even though the the fall enrollment is open. We're communicating the best we can with our students in advance. We're actually finalizing some student communication right now that will explain the situation, and hope to be able to make all of the changes necessary this week so that we can very quickly start turning our attention to producing an up-to-date printed schedule that Kristen Darkin will be facilitating the creation of, as she's done a wonderful job in the past. But we expect to be able to mail out that printed schedule and announce throughout the district the plans for our fall semester, to be able to let students continue with courses that they can count on and communicate what the plans will be. And so expect that printed schedule to arrive in the mail late June. Are there any questions that you have for me?
Oh, Marilyn has her hand up. Go ahead, Marilyn.
All right. I would just like to say that these are three of our faculty members that represent the best of MPC. From different corners of the campus. They have touched the lives of countless students. And how do we recognize them, John? Is there, normally there's a teacher retirement breakfast. What can we do to give them some sense of honor from the rest, from the rest of us out there?
So that is a great question, and I will ask you to stay tuned because we are talking about some options as we wrap up this semester for recognizing their incredible work. Even though we can't do our traditional celebrations that we have been able to do in the past, we want to be able to recognize these folks.
Thank you very much.
I see student trustee Martin has his hand up. Robert, you still there?
Yes. So John, can you give me an idea about what the drop rate is during the spring semester as compared with other semesters?
I don't have that information available at this time. We are in the middle of finals week, and so we're going to have a good picture of student completion after this week when our final reports and grades are submitted and when we run the final enrollment reports and we get a sense from our admissions and records office of what the excused withdrawal requests were. That information's all been gathered and is being processed by admissions and records. And so we should start to have a very clear sense for what this looks like in the next couple of weeks.
So you'd be able to report on it on the next board meeting?
I certainly hope so.
Thank you.
And, we're going to take questions from the board first, and then we'll come to the public one, but I see you. Are there any board members who have a question or comment for Dr. Cannoli? Well, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate, and I think that students will appreciate the what to expect perspective that we're taking, making a decision about this is what fall is going to look like and being able to start communicate that. And I can say that from the perspective of a parent of a school-age child, we have no idea what's going on with our kids next year. And so for our students to be able to say, okay, this is what is available to me, and to be able to plan for that, I think great mental harmony that, just helps to settle the discomfort that people are having. So I appreciate MPC for taking that step and moving forward to do that. On a somewhat selfish question, but I think it relates to many people in our community, because we don't know what the K through 12 environment looks like next year. And we've had parents literally drafted into the teaching profession for the last couple of months who have no qualifications to do that. Speaking for myself, is there any conversation or ability for MPC to do some quick pivoting or planning for parents who are, now engaging in distance learning and distance instruction to help them better understand how to help their students who are at home engaging in distance learning? Do we have that level of flexibility, when the school districts just say, yes, it is going to be 3-2 kind of distance learning, and parents, you need to be doing this, to offer some sort of support and how to engage in learning? Or is it kind of, because of all the processes that we have in place for getting courses approved and programs and stuff, there's no way we could offer that sort of resource to the community?
There are certainly options available to us. We've been in some really great conversations in the past week with our K-12 partners as we're trying to figure out where they're going, because we also have a lot of shared responsibilities, including dual enrollment. And that is something that's come up in recent conversations about how are they, or how could we help prepare parents. Some of the feedback has been about how, parents are so busy with between their own work and now trying to help their kids. The last thing they want is to try and take a class from us to add to their time schedule. But there has been some brief conversation about that, and that could certainly be something to explore. In addition to parents, I will say, and I believe she's on the call, Dean Judy Cutting, who is the Dean of our Career Education Programs, has been working with our industry partners and the Workforce Development Board, and they're exploring ways that we can be proactive in meeting the needs of the community. Like, for example, many of our restaurants have been struggling because they've had to be closed. Can we offer some sort of training to help them understand what it might take to ramp up and operate in a COVID-19 world? And so our hospitality program and Dean Cutting and some of those partners are exploring those kinds of options. So now is the time to be creative. Now is the time to look for how we can support our community's needs. We do have to be very creative in how we approach accomplishing those, but we can certainly explore those options and ideas, and I appreciate you bringing that one up.
All right, any other questions or comments from board members before we go to the public? No. Okay, so Marlene, I saw your hand first. If you'd like to. Oh, hold on, you're still muted. Let's see.
And
there you go.
Ironically, arranged that wonderful brunch that we used to have, and they as colleagues, they were just really wonderful people. So whatever we could. I also am interested in Yuri's comment about helping parents. I have 2 sons who are parents, and I hear a lot of complaining about how difficult it is for them because they're not teachers and they have kids. They're unhappy.
All right, thank you. All right, if there's no one else who wants to speak to this item, we'll thank you for your report and for everything that you're doing, and send our love to our retiring faculty and interim dean, I think it's the title is. And I bake, so if there's plans for putting things together, let me know. I enjoy baking. All right, so next, so we were supposed to take a break at 7. It's now 7:08, but I'm seeing the end of the tunnel. So if the board is okay with it, we'll just power through the next couple of reports. Thumbs up?
Yeah.
Good. All right. All right, so next we have our student services report. Mr. Walker, are you still hanging with us?
Yes, can you see me?
Mm-hmm. And
okay, I can't see myself. So however I look,
comment.
How do I look, Robert?
Fantastic.
Okay, right on. So I know as Chair Anderson mentioned, we're at the sort of tail end of the reports. So I'm just going to try to be as brief as possible in 37 minutes. So hopefully just bear with me. But with that being said, I would be remiss. Thank you, John, for acknowledging, and Marilyn for acknowledging the 3 retirees coming out. Obviously, you know that Lyndon Schutzler and Mark Clemens had dual roles in student services and academic affairs. So they were the true leaders many, many years ago in bridging the gap between academic affairs and student services. Their leadership paved the way to the way we operate today. It's always been the expectation that student services and academic affairs work closely together. That's been sort of symbolic at the Chancellor's office. And MPC was before its time in making sure that we integrated student services and academic affairs. And Mark Clemens and Dean Schutzler exemplified that coordinated effort between those 2 divisions and set the tone for our campus to work collaboratively together in the best interest of students. So again, I know they've been able to acknowledge, there will be more acknowledgement for them, but their legacy will continue on at MPC in the lives of not just the students that they've touched, but our classified, our faculty, and our administrators who've had the pleasure and honor of working with them throughout their tenure at Monterey Peninsula College. So thank you all for your service to our beloved college and Lobos forever. With that being said, you have my written report. I don't have much more to add to that other than to let you know that student services is fully online, as you know, in a virtual format, and the engagement from our student population has been enormous in this new format. The amount of emails, Zoom sessions, virtual sessions, counseling sessions has just skyrocketed. Ironically, the engagement has been more than ever before. And we're excited that it still continues in a meaningful way. We're not just talking about just the emails or the Zoom meetings. These are meaningful connections with our students during these challenging times. And I just need to take my hat off to our student services team for their rapid response to meeting student needs during this challenging time. They have definitely risen to the occasion of meeting the needs of our students. So with that being said, you have my written report, and I just would be available for any questions.
Thank you. Student Trustee Mountain?
Two questions, Larry. First of all, are you using student ambassadors in the online format? And do you plan to do that?
At this time, they have not been as actively engaged in the follow-up piece. Much of our focus during the transition was focusing the follow-up with our permanent staff. And once we get that down, then we can begin to look at engaging our student ambassadors. So to date, no, but that is a good concept. And I think we would begin to explore that possibly in the fall to engage them a little bit more. We do have some tutoring, some student employees that are working in an online format, but it's more in tutoring. It's not at this point follow-up services. We're trying to get the scripts down on what we're looking for. Some of these follow-ups for students are really, they can be intense at times. So we want to make sure that we get the vibe and the theme, and that we properly train and support our students if they're going to be working with their peers in that type of a format. So that's a good idea. We'll definitely follow up on this to see how we can expand the role of the ambassadors in this online format.
Great, great. Second question has to do with HIS and how is that extra 167 being allocated?
At this time, that's at the cabinet level. Those funds, the higher education emergency relief, is under the umbrella of the CARES Act. It follows the same guidelines for dispersing of that. It can be used for all direct aid, but it can also be used to defer the cost for going through online and virtual formats. So it mirrors the CARE funds. It's an additional resource for those individuals, for those colleges that have that are classified as Hispanic serving institutions or minority serving institutions. They were given an additional allocation. So that 162 is at the cabinet level for discussion, and based on the recent information that was presented by VP Hagler and President Martin on the status of our budget, these one-time funds are going to be critical to be able to bridge the gap as we transition to address some of these budget shortfalls. So it can be used in a manner consistent with what the CARES Act, anything related to transitioning to online on or after March 13th. So Cabinet would probably be the first level of discussion on how these funds may best be used.
Great, thank you, Larry.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from board members? I was just noticing in the food pantry notes that comes out of student services, and I was going to make it in my board comments, but I'll just do it now. A huge shout out to David and Larry and Kristen for your guys' partnership over the past month with the county and the supervisor's office. And one of those partnerships has been related to the food bank, food distribution there that's happening on MPC campus for people in need. And in that conversation, the executive director of the food bank had indicated an interest in expanding their relationship with the college and potentially setting up a free farmers market for our students to get fresh fruits and vegetables to them. And I know that's something that we've heard the student trustees talk about in the past, is kind of increasing the quality of the food that's available. So I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't just kept that information in my head, but that I'd forwarded on to the folks that could take that ball and run with it. And then I've had some people asking me, and I don't know if this is student services or not, probably not, about the status of the farmers market that had been operating on MPC that's now at Del Monte Shopping Center. So I see that under our current planning for reopening, that wouldn't be allowed under stage 4 to happen on the campus. But do we have a sense of whether or not that will be coming back to MPC?
Yes, I'm going to defer to David and or Steve. They have probably the latest on that particular one.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Anderson and Vice President Walker. Right now, as you mentioned, the Friday market is being held at the Del Monte Center, and as soon as health guidance permits, we hope to have them back on our campus as soon as possible. So we will keep everybody in the loop, but stay tuned for the return date, hopefully over the summer.
Cool. Thanks. All right. Is there any other board member who would like to ask a question or comment? Vice President Walker? Nobody jump in? Any member of the public? Boom. All right. Thank you, Larry. You guys are doing a crazy amount of work.
Yes, exciting.
All right, so next we have the Administrative Services Report from Vice President Hagler, and I heard Steve basically say, I'm not going to talk to my report unless you have questions. So is that still true? Did you want to add something else, Steve?
You took the words right out of my mouth. So yes, it's a much more detailed version of the May revise. Again, it was based on that joint analysis by the Chancellor's Office, ACPO and ACA. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have regarding it.
Questions from the trustees? Lots of no's. All right. Any question or comment from the public? Seeing none, we thank you very much for all of the reports you provided to us this evening.
That was the easiest one.
Well, that one took some time to write, maybe. Or did you just cut and paste?
I wrote some and I cut and pasted some.
All right. All righty. So next we are on to governing board comments. So it starts here with a highlight for Trustee Steck on Community Human Services. So Lauren, if you want to start with any comments you have on
Community Human Services.
Or other.
Can you hear me? First of all, that's a question. Okay. Somehow I have to figure out how to increase the volume of my microphone. But Community Human Services works in a manner that's quite similar to the community colleges in the state, and that is as the need rises, funding goes down. So the state has the county's been quite good at getting Community Human Services, CHS, it's the money that it is owed for reimbursements on time, and that had been a problem for a number of months. But that is working itself out, and that's great news for CHS. But the problem is there's not that much money in the various contracts that we have with the state, with the county, that are funded by the state. So CHS, the good news about CHS and its situation is they were also able to obtain a PPP loan, the payroll protection loan. Not all of it is forgivable in our case, but some of it is, and so we are happy to have that, and we're trying to figure out how to, if not invest those funds, how to maintain the funds until we use them all up. You know, it's essentially 2.5 months worth of payroll, but you have 2 years in which to use it. So those are the things that they're doing. So that's what I have for CHS. Any questions about it? Uh-oh, I've lost people again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I
Okay.
don't see any questions.
All right, great.
Anything else you want to tell us? Anything about
sure. So then,
CCA?
yeah, I'll spend a minute, just a second on CCLC. You know, I've been part of the CEO task force on the funding formula, and I had a role that I took very seriously, which was to represent trustees' perspectives and also focus our attention on the fiscal cliff at the end of Hold Harmless. But we were all blindsided by the COVID, and I'm thinking that becomes an increasingly small part of the charge that we have. And the charge that we have currently is to try to prepare our districts in the state for the response to COVID. We've gotten some great presentations from Steve Hagler today. And I can tell you from Steve and from David both, I can tell you from what I see at the state level, looking at other districts, it is really the case that we are ahead of the curve in terms of reopening. That the thing that David did was flabbergasting, because we are way ahead of everybody else that I know of. Just as Yuri stated, K-12 is behind too. So it may be the case that they're not behind, we're just ahead. And Steve already presented you better than I could the situation. The way we're thinking about it is, instead of calling it an 8% reduction and zero COLA, we're kind of calling it you get the COLA, but then you get 10% taken away. And that 10% equivalent makes equivalent the amount of funding that is lost in K-12, as well as at CSU and at UC, with what's the community college system is losing. So they're all losing about 10% of their funding. And the question that we were trying to wrestle with most recently is, how can we make the community college system case that monies to support community colleges are now more important than ever? The state legislature has the potential of tweaking the governor's proposal, and it's not necessarily the case that the final budget that is passed will be exactly 10% reductions for everybody. But it is likely that it'll be that way unless we're able to intercede with the legislature on the behalf of the community college system. And the problem with that is, it's quite clear that younger facets of education for young children is hurting also, and there's a great need for that, and it's clear that the need is unmet. So we have to fight against them. We've heard that CSU and in particular UC could weather cuts because they have very strong and well-entrenched fundraising organizations, and there's fundraising opportunities for them that we really don't have in the community college system. They deal with a different level than we're dealing with. So that's what we're wrestling with now, is essentially responses to the COVID-19 crisis, and not really focused at all on the fiscal cliff or even the funding formula, except how it's unworkable. That's my report.
I had a question. We received an email that I guess was from a task force of the CCLC that was kind of asking trustees what our feelings were about reopening plans. And it wasn't clear if that was supposed to be, as an individual, or was it supposed to be as a board? Because at the end you were supposed to say, what district you represented. So I looked at it and I ultimately didn't do it because I was like, we haven't had a conversation as a board about where we're at.
Yeah, it's a great point, Yuri. The trouble is, we are getting responses from on the order of 70 or 80 trustees, and they may be nested within a small number of districts. There's about 450 or so trustees across the system, and we're getting, a fifth of them. And quite often we're getting 5 people from the same board. In the past surveys that we sent out, we weren't smart enough to put in something in which we asked for people's affiliations to be able to change that. So now we're to be able to treat those data differently than we otherwise would. We're now getting smart enough to ask the question, but we haven't figured out how we're going to answer it. I believe that the intention is to get individual trustee responses, so feel free to answer, and Marilyn should feel free to answer, and me too. But we will be figuring out a way of nesting the responses from within one board so that they carry a little different kind of weight than individual responses when there's just one person from it. But the goal is to get everybody to respond, and it's hard to get everybody to respond across the system.
All right. Well, thank you for those comments.
Sure, I don't know if I clarified anything, but yeah, the short answer is answer the questionnaire.
Okay. All right. How about we'll go to our student trustee. Robert, you want to make any comments?
I'll make two brief comments. First of all, I'd say that in terms of online courses, even a perfectly executed online course is going to fall way short of what a total educational experience needs to be for that core population of young people who are coming to us to begin their undergraduate education. And so I'd urge the administration to move aggressively as possible to open up the library and other physical learning things on campus, the labs too. Secondly, I want to stress the importance of paying attention to the drop rate as a very important metric. Okay, it's not only a tool for formative evaluation, it's also an indicator of success of the online strategy, and it's also a measure of impact of COVID on students. So I think that deserves, first of all, very thorough analysis and very close attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn, any comments this afternoon?
I don't have anything specifically. I thanked the foundation for their help with the scholarships. I think the mailbag is terrific as far as keeping people informed. I just read into the chats, and I'll share with you which one of the visitors to our meeting today has said, and this came from Eric Ogata to everyone. I don't know if you've taken a chance to read it. He says, in my 22 years at MPC, I have truly valued and benefited from the guidance and mentorship of all of the 3 retirees being recognized this evening. I look forward to a time when I can raise a glass to their retirement with each of them. So I think that sums up a bit of my message, So as we try to find some way to honor the faculty who are retiring, as we all join together on Saturday morning and honor the graduates as they have their car parade on Fishnet Road, and we can recognize them in some small way for what they are doing. We're doing what we can. And I support how much energy it takes from everyone to keep this all going. So nothing more to say.
Marilyn. Trustee Johnson.
I actually just have a few questions real quick. David, can you tell us what's happening with the update? Give us an update on the community college online college. Seeing as we're all now online colleges.
Rick, that question may need another separate board meeting all within itself, but ultimately the long and the skinny of it is that you nailed it right on the head that we are now all online community colleges. So right now the Calbright Community College is still part of the system. It is still receiving funding and they may revise, but ultimately it is a topic of much discussion at the legislative level as to what its path looks like moving forward. So right now I would say that as of today, it is funded, it is moving forward, and it is part of our system. but ultimately that may and most likely in some sense will change over the next several months. So more to come, but great question.
Well, and before you're off the hook, how are we doing on the COVID-19 tests at MPC?
Oh, thank you for that question. And we are doing well. Ultimately, the testing and the actual collection and examination of the test is being done by another agency and an outside testing entity. So MPC is really facilitating through the use of our parking facilities and helping direct traffic. But ultimately, the allocation of tests is approximately 100 per day. And the testing starts at 9, and each and every day that they have been open, we have gone through the entire allotment of tests. So people are coming, the tests are occurring, and ultimately we look forward to being a part of that partnership as long as the testing kits are available and there's a need.
Good, good. You know, I would bring up a friend of mine, younger friend, everybody's younger, a younger friend has 2 sons. One is now a sophomore at a private school in California, and one's a senior in high school. And he told me the other day that the one in the private school will be going to MPC next year, not to the private school. They looked at our classes, what we're offering, and he said, if they're gonna be online, let's bring them home. And so I think we'll be seeing some of that. Yuri, I would just like to thank you for all that you've been doing during this whole thing. What a year to be chair. So thank you. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, Rosalind? You still
So
there?
I don't have much to say. I will say that to everyone that gave a report, a presentation, just information and spoke today, thank you so much. The meeting today seemed to have flowed very gracefully. As I was tiring out with the whole Zoom room thing, today hit a little different and it came back alive for me. And I also wanted to thank you all for accepting my non-presence, so to say, and my picture in place. And those that knew that I experienced a medical emergency last week. I have frozen shoulders, so I'm not really getting dressed or combing my hair. Thank you for your thoughts and well wishes. And so I appreciate that. And then lastly, everyone, all the trustees have already made outstanding comments, so I won't carry on with the time. But as a parent of MPC, I have to really take my hat off to the entire staff. It kind of chokes me up, but I was kind of fearful when we first rolled into this pandemic, and I thought, you know, oh God, my son, my student, was already struggling in his transition, and I thought, this is definitely the last thing that he needed. But I will say that with everyone and the rapid response and everything that we've done, put in place, he's actually come through and he did an amazing job. And so as a parent, I want to applaud our faculty and our staff and administration and just everyone for job well done. And I am amazed with our summer enrollment. And, you know, I look forward to seeing, you know, where this goes and how many folks really do enjoy online learning, you know. So Thanks again.
Thank you, Rosalind. So I had in my notes, I wanted to make sure to thank Joreen and Kayla specifically for the support that they've been providing to Marilyn and I and the ad hoc committee. It's just been tremendous, and really appreciate you guys stepping up and doing that with us and helping us move this aggressive timeline that the board has set. I briefly said thanks to David, Larry, and Kristen Darkin for really leading these partnership efforts with the county, but I can't say it enough. They have allowed me to leverage my role as a trustee against my role as chief of staff to the district supervisor to bring some really needed resources to our community. And I think all I've heard is how great it is that MPC is offering these, and people aren't really seeing the county in it at all. They're seeing MPC as offering these resources to the community. And I think that it really sticks with me to what David had said when we met with him one of the first times about, if you want to see what MPC is about, go look at the track on a Saturday morning and see who's out there running in the community using it, and the kids soccer teams and whatnot. And so this is a way that we can continue to be providing that resource. And I just really want to appreciate it, because I know that you guys have ended up picking up way more of the work of it than I did. All I do is send emails to so-and-so to say this. And so thank you. And I know Larry I think he's actually out there directing traffic sometimes. So thank you. Let's see, I already talked about the marketing messages. Rick, I appreciate the kudos and the appreciation for me, but I have to say, like Rosalind said, this staff has just been tremendous during this time. I don't think, not only did you guys not skip a beat, but you're just like, let's just skip down the road and do everything. The speed at which you're working, the quality of the work that you're doing, how well you're communicating with us and with each other and with the students, and all the transitioning. I couldn't be more proud to be chair of this board right now and to be able to share what MPC is doing to keep our students moving forward and to help our community. So please take care of yourselves. That is one of the biggest things I have. And for the board, so I have forced David to have like a 30-minute check-in with me every week for the past month or so, just to kind of know what's going on and check in and make sure that he's doing what he needs to do. And our biggest issue right now is getting him stable Wi-Fi in his office. But really taking that responsibility that you've given me as a chair seriously, and trying to make sure that we shepherd our college and our district through this time, but we also continue to move on the goals that we set together. And I think that we're doing that as well as we possibly can. And finally, just wanted to thank you for allowing my children to visit the meeting this evening. They are coming to many of my meetings. And I think that it's important for people to kind of see that happening, that we all are in very different situations as we experience this pandemic and shifts, and trying to figure out how we continue to be workers and board members and parents and grandparents and whatever other roles that we hold, and recognize that when we come to these tables, we bring all of those roles and experiences. And I think that's really one of the most powerful things about an elected community-based board, that we need to be welcoming of all of those roles at the table and bringing that voice to bear as we figure out how we move forward. So anyway, Everett and Lillian love Zoom meetings. They're nuts. So with that, we have a little bit of advanced planning. I think the big one is our drive-through graduation ceremony on Saturday. I hope everyone is going to be able to be there in your regalia. I wanted to clarify, what time is it that you wanted people who are lining up to wave and shake signs to arrive?
No later than 11:30, otherwise you're gonna have the potential of getting caught up in the graduation traffic. So
Perfect.
Between 11 and 11:30 would be great.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then we have a special board meeting on June 1st. And then summer session starts on the 8th, and our next regular board meeting is June 24th. And you can see the other dates on there. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we will adjourn this meeting at 7:40 p.m. And I wish everyone good health.